We're back here again, closing out June the way we started June. You might remember at the beginning of June, I put up a list of the top 10 best-selling single malt Scotch whiskies globally, and I decided that I would, as a bit of a reset, reconnect with those whiskies again. And we went through all 10 whiskies on that night back at the beginning of the month. Well, of course, the feedback from that was very, very interesting. You engaged with it much more than I expected you to, and I think all of you appreciated that I was almost kind of, it's a wee bit rude to say taking one for the team, right? But you understand what I'm saying. These are not typically whiskies that the people tuning into the vPub would go out and buy. So in order to kind of reset or kind of recalibrate our outlooks and everything, I looked into those. And there were a few surprises. Some of them were not good surprises. Some of them were positive surprises. But some of the feedback that I received was, what about the whiskies, Roy, that are designed to do these very things but don't make it into the top 10? What about this one and this one and that one? And of course, I'd already been thinking about that, because when I looked at the top 10, there was lots of omissions that I would have rather be uncorking and tasting. So that's what we're going to do tonight. A community edit, if you like. Certainly me editing that top 10, not caring about what the best sellers are, but everything that's available, everything that's roughly got the same specs, that is ubiquitous, core range, entry level, mass market, however you want to talk about these things, but they are age stated and typically lower ABV because they're made to a price and they're available to everyone, everywhere, almost all of the time. So we're going to look at another 10 tonight. And we're going to edit that original list that we started at the beginning of June. We'll see how we got on. You can get involved as well, and I'll tell you about that when I see you in a second. Looking forward to it, as always. Hello, whiskey folk. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the vPub. Welcome to another Thursday night. Now, I was a wee bit surprised at how well the session at the beginning of the month went down. I think if you had not connected with it, I think if it didn't get much of a kind of reaction, I might have just quietly ditched this one at the end of the month. So, you know, I didn't spend a lot of time talking about it. But one thing I did promise you at the beginning of the month is that I would rate the 10 whiskies. And we didn't get around to that. We didn't get around to me kind of give them any kind of score or rank or anything, but we will do that tonight. And I think it's better we do it tonight, because if we add another 10 into the mix, inevitably there's going to be whiskies in that 10 that disrupt the top 10 and the top 10 rank. Remember, we need to distinguish between the two. The top 10 at the beginning of the month was based on no preference whatsoever. It was the top 10 best sellers. I'll pull up a wee overlay here to remind you of what they were and to remind you of the scale of everything from the beginning of the month. But what we're shifting the lens to focus on tonight is going to be our preferences. We don't care how many bottles they sell. We care about, do these whiskies actually bring us any value? Is there any engagement at these price points? Are these quite good whiskies? And would we end up recommending them, maybe purchasing them for ourselves? Certainly that would be amazing. However, we've got other things to distract us these days, it seems. But what about people that are just coming into the scene? It's critical that I find a way to make sure everyone that's involved in enjoying whiskey is seen, and that's people on a very low budget or people that are just coming into the scene, as much as the people that can spend loads and loads on it and people that are well seasoned and have been around for a long time. Because I think there's something in these whiskies for us all. And as the point I made at the start of the month, sometimes it's just a simple case of recalibrating, going back to the beginning of our journeys, going back to the accessible whiskies and tasting them all over again. These whiskies that we've decided are boring or dull or watered down or just not interesting for us anymore, for whatever the reason is, in order to guard against, you know, snobbery, for that to be real informed thought rather than just snobbery and dismissiveness, we need to go back and check what those whiskies are like, or at least somebody does. And for the month of June 2024, it's me, and that's okay. A lot of whiskies that I'm going to share with you tonight are unlikely to have been on your shelves for a long time, but some of them you will recognise. Some of them you will know very, very well. It's going to be interesting to see whether you enjoy them or not. Anyway, that's the plan tonight. So again, I've got another 10 Glencairns in front of me. In fact, I've got a wee bit more because I've got my kind of welcome everybody dram in the glass too. And I tried one of the ones that I tried at the end of the month just to do a wee double check on it. And yeah, it was one I didn't really enjoy very much. You seem to love it. I didn't enjoy it again tonight. We'll get to that a wee bit later. I've got my 10 glasses in front of me to keep a lid on how much I'm consuming. If I'm going to sit and open and pour 10 different whiskies with you tonight, then of course I have to be responsible and pour very, very small pours. Some of the comments that came back after the session at the beginning of the month is, how are you still standing or sitting? How are you not slurring your words and all of these type of things? And I need everybody to realize that the pours are tiny. The ABV is also very, very low in comparison to other vPub nights. And I don't care if I don't drink these whiskies at the end of the night. If they end up in a spittoon or whatever, that's okay. And that's what happened last time. It happens a lot like that on the vPub. It's not about what we pour, it's what we consume. So tonight it's about variety and it's not about quantity. I better just organise my glasses a wee bit better. But yes, 10 Glencairns out in front of me tonight. Quite incredible. But I've got 20 bottles of whiskey. I've got the original 10 over my right shoulder. And over to my left, I've got the 10 that I'm going to share with you tonight. Anyway, before we get into all of that, all of those shenanigans and silliness, I'm going to do what I always do and jump into the lounge and welcome some of you beautiful whiskey folk and dedicated barflies. I hope you're all doing very, very well. I'll do what I always do and I'll look for the orange. I'm going to scroll back a wee bit to catch the people that have been in and chatting already. If you type Aquavite, it comes up orange for me at Aquavite or just Aquavite. It all seems to work these days. Tim Pills is in. Good to see you, Tim. He's saying, evening, interesting topic. Not thought about most of these for many years. Some good ones in there, though. Cheers. Well, I hope that that's the case, Tim. A few of them are open. Some of them are sealed, and I'll be uncorking them with you tonight. But for me, it's going to be interesting to try some of these too. And if I've taken a hit on these, know that none of them are particularly expensive. I doubt that any of them are going to truly go to waste. I think that somebody has to be checking these whiskies. And if I do find something that's worthy to recommend to you, or something that you can safely recommend to folk coming into the scene, so much the better, right? David Lorenko from Portugal is here too, saying good evening, Whiskeyverse. Good evening to you as well, David. Hellswood is here saying good evening, Roy. None of that list open. Oh, okay. And Danny Keenan is saying, good evening, Roy. I hope you're well. Interesting topic ahead. Cheers. What I should have pointed out to you, actually, is if you're joining live, and I appreciate that it's only the people that are joining live that can participate in this thing, but I'll leave the results up for everyone to see. But if you are joining live tonight, you've got a few minutes still where you can click at the top of the chat window. You'll see a pinned link there that will take you to a poll. And that poll's listing all 20 whiskies that we're going to talk about tonight. There are some notable omissions. I'll talk about that in a second. But the 20 that are on the table for discussion tonight are there. And I'm just going to ask you to pick 10. It's just little selection boxes. Just click 10, submit. It's dead easy. You can do it very, very quickly. But before we get into appraising these whiskies tonight, I'm going to kill that poll. So you've got a few more minutes to get in and do that just now. Have a wee look at that if you can. I'm going to leave it up there for now before I kill it, before we start talking about the individual bottles. Tony Nelson is here. Tony, so good to see you, buddy. Saying several of the options on the list of 43% here in the States, Vice 40%, Balvenie, Macallan, one or two more. Absolutely. If you look at the Laphroaig, for example, I can guarantee you that Laphroaig over in the US, you're getting that export strength of 43%. I hope that it helps it for you because it's certainly needing something to help it for me. The Laphroaig was one of the worst at the start of the month. Really disappointed in it. I've got other 10-year-old Laphroaigs there on the shelf that are much better than it. It's nothing to do with branding. I think it's just everything to do with the fact that there's no more mature stock being added into the mix there. I think they're leaning a wee bit more on perhaps colour. They're leaning a wee bit more on the only stocks that they have of their 10-year-old is there's going to be very little much older than 10-year-old in most of these age-stated products tonight are 12 years old, if that's the age. It's just the way that we're at. The older whiskies are becoming a wee bit more precious. They're not kind of lifting the vatings anymore like they used to, or that's certainly the way it tastes to me as a consumer. I have no insight in this, of course. I'm just speaking to you from the consumer side. Yeah, if you do get some of these at 43%, I think it will help them, certainly. We suffer from it here in the UK, from 40% on a lot of them. Nick Keane is here. Good evening from Birmingham. Nick Keane, of course, I met Nick and Penny while they were in the Bon Accord on Sunday. Ever so briefly, it was too short a visit. Lovely to see you both again, and amazing that you're on UK time. Maybe you've even got a dram instead of a cup of coffee this time. I hope you're enjoying your trip, and you're looking forward to making plans to come back again, and maybe we'll get a chance to hang out a wee bit longer, guys. Bruno Martins is saying good evening, Roy. Bruno also in Portugal. Good to see you, Bruno. Always wonderful to welcome you in. And Pia is saying evening, Roy. Thanks for the afternoon struggle. Still recovering. Oh, okay. Thanks for the. Oh, okay. He's talking about the poll. So many people are commenting that they found it so hard to click those radio buttons. I get it. I understand. It's not whiskies that we typically connect with. It's the fact that so many people have struggled to even place a selection for it. They're not spending money. They're not buying it. They're not being asked to drink it. The fact that they're even coming out in cold sweats to select them tells you how distant they are from that whiskey. Now, I'm not going to judge. I'm not suggesting that it's bad they've moved beyond those whiskies. But I wonder how recently these whiskies have been sipped for so many of us. Listen, I'm not here to change anyone's minds. We know the lane that we enjoy. We like to stay in that lane and stick in that lane. And I'm here to tell you if you should consider overtaking the partners, jumping off into the hard shoulder every now and again. Harrow is here, Whiskey Weekend Dram. Good to see you, buddy. Mike Molasses also too. Good evening, Aquavite. This was a challenging exercise for me, as I would probably walk past most of those and search for something better. Of course you would, Mike, like the majority of us here. And the bar, Mike Fielder is in saying good afternoon, Barflies and Aquavite. Good to see you, Martin. Wonderful to welcome you in. Whiskey with Molly. Ben is here saying good evening, Roy. Good to see you in, Ben. I hope you're keeping well, buddy. And Gino is saying evening, Roy. Hope you're doing well. I am, Gino. I'm feeling okay. Major Nut is saying, evening, Roy. See how long I managed to stay tonight. I promised to catch up during the weekend. Major Nut, that's exactly the design of the vPub. Anybody can come in late. Anybody can come in early and leave early. Just the vPub should be like a regular pub. It should work around your schedule, your mood, and your moment. Exactly right, buddy. If you have to pitch out tonight and catch up on the replay, I'm very grateful. Thank you. Max Kreitler is saying good evening, Roy. Choosing 10 wasn't easy after 4 or 5. I didn't want to choose anything else. Would have been interesting if it encouraged you just to select what you wanted to select. I think we would have seen quite a contrast in the numbers. But yeah, you could have chosen 4 or 5, Max, and then quit out. I didn't set a minimum, but I did set a maximum of 10. Jimmy Legg is saying, hi everyone, to you, Duffster. Good to see you, Jimmy Legg. Wonderful to have you in. We need to get our heads together and finalise the plans for the end of September, don't we? That'll all be done and dusted before I take off for the summer break. Robert Fredrickson is saying, evening and cheers to you all, Barflies. Hope you have something fun in your glass. I've got Glen Scotia Festival 2023. Fantastic. Good to see you in, Robert. I don't know if I've not welcomed you in recently, buddy, but it's good to see you in here tonight. Gav Strams is here. Gav, always a pleasure to welcome in you, buddy. I hope you're doing well. Hi, Roy. Hope to see you on Sunday. On Sunday, of course, I'm through in Edinburgh on Sunday. If you're going to be there, that's a bonus, Gav. Fantastic. Jerry Miller is saying, looking forward to the replay, Roy. Got to leave right at the start today. That's okay, Jerry. It's wonderful to have had you in for a wee bit early. It's nice of you to dropped in and said hello. You're maybe away already, buddy. Thank you. XS to Scotch is saying, good evening, Roy and Barflies. Greetings from Corfu. 2 hours later, and an ouzo instead of a whiskey this vPub. I hope my 10 whiskies make the cut. Good to see you in, and I hope that ouzo is tasting good. Over in Corfu as it would a whiskey back home. Brian is saying, good evening, Barflies. On my way to work, and I'll catch the replay later tonight. Have a great vPub sesh. Thank you, Brian. Thank you very much. And Julian Rickman is saying, good evening, Roy. Aquavite Barflies. Looking forward to an entertaining evening. Can't promise entertainment, but I'll do my very best. I'll be entertained because I'm the one getting to sip the whiskey, right? Jimmy Jazz is saying, good evening. Sorry, just jumped here. Let me go back up. What happened? I missed MJ Rodden. MJ Rodden, good to welcome you in. Jimmy Jazz, I was looking for a comment. Sorry. Road to Drama, Alberto 2. Greg's Whiskey Guide in Paris. David Evans. Gerben Lurwek, good to see you. And my friend in Klaus in Germany, Falsgraf. This is very, very fidgety and nervous tonight. He's saying a very good evening, Roy. These are entry-level whiskies have come back in my radar since I'm thinking of doing some tastings for noobs. Exactly. It helps you a wee bit when you take the EBV down a bit, I think. It's easy to get them enjoying 46, 48% whiskies. But if you just go straight in with the higher ABV, you can often turn folk off. Sachin is in saying, good evening, Aquavite. And Dura Court is here saying there's an option to edit your response. So maybe at the end of the night, we should see what people would remove if they could. That's a good idea. I'm going to kill the poll in the next couple of minutes. So if anybody's thinking of jumping in now, do it right now, do it as quickly as you can, and then I'll kill it off so that we can get everything started tonight. Whiskey Games, Matt Bishop is celebrating being a member of the Barflies for 50 months. The big 50. Thanks, Roy, and all the Barflies. Thank you to you, Matt, for all your support. You're not only here as a Barfly buddy, you're there on Patreon as well, making everything tick and supporting everything, Matt. You're a superstar. Thank you. David Hong has bought me a dram from the US. A very generous dram too. I'll leave a wee a love and a like for that one, David. Thank you very, very much. No comment or anything, just a generous dram. Cheers to you, David. And my pal from the Netherlands, Daniel Williams, celebrating being a member of the Barflies for 42 months, saying the answer to life, the universe, and everything. He's potentially talking about a dram. Okay. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you very, very much for your support. Barflies keep the vPub ad-free. They join the YouTube membership here and keep it ad-free. Patreon, the Patreon supporters, the people who support me as patrons, they make everything happen. That's the real oiling machine is Patreon. But your support, however you support, through the Barfly memberships, through Patreon, through just giving a wee like, to show everybody that this is legitimate whiskey content, despite the fact it goes on for 2.5, sometimes 3 hours, right? It's legitimate and it's earnest content, it's real. And leave a comment, a wee bit of interaction, share, talk about it, evangelize about the fact that there's a virtual whiskey pub online. But welcome everybody. Thank you all for your support, however that happens. Cheers. Just by the fact that you're watching means so much. Okay. I've got the first whiskey in the glass. So I'm going to kill our poll tonight. I'm not going to look at it. I don't want to see it. I don't want to be led. But likewise, I don't want to lead you either. So I'm just going to kill this. No longer accepting responses. So, wow, that's amazing. I only put this poll on this afternoon and 344 of you have stepped forward to answer it. Thank you so, so much. When I went live tonight, well, maybe just before I went live, the last time I looked at this poll, it was sitting about 200 responses. I don't want to look at it right now, but I'm going to take a wee screen grab a bit later on and I'll share it with you. But what I'm also going to try and do tonight, and I might fail at this, but I'm going to do my best. Because things are moving tonight, because I'm trying these whiskies, potentially disrupting this top 10 that we have from the start of June. Obviously, it's going to change. So I'm going to want to try and bring in an overlay or something once I've fixed what my top 10 is. And then I'll have a look into the community top 10, and I'll try and put together a quick overlay. There's 10 images there. Actually, there's 20 images there that I've got to kind of shuffle around into 10 and make an overlay that I can put up on screen. And you can see what your picks are versus my picks. And I'll maybe try and even do some kind of wee overlay or something so that they're next to each other and we can compare and contrast to see how they are, see if there's any contrast there whatsoever, what the perception is from the community versus the whiskey I'm tasting tonight. Listen, there's nothing scientific here. There's no kind of real conclusions going to be drawn from this. This is a little bit of fun, a little bit of curiosity, and a little bit if you're going to have me sitting here talking about whiskey week after week, criticizing whiskey sometimes, generally trying to describe and get ideas and concepts of whiskey across, then you have to trust that I'm trying whiskies the same as you guys are, that we are trying the same whiskies, sure, fantastic, but different whiskies too. And if I'm going to celebrate a whiskey, then it's because I have a decent amount of experience with lots of whiskies in order to celebrate something. And if I'm going to criticize something, it's because I've got that similar depth of experience, all those reference points in order to be able to critique something and then obviously justify my critique or whatever it may be. I think it's important to try and do that, but it's also even more important, arguably, to remember it's only ever just a single person's opinion, especially when I'm sitting in front of you having real-time reactions in front of you, whether it's an open bottle or something that I'm uncorking tonight. That's all that we say. However, when we know whiskey, when we've been around whiskey for a wee while, if our palates are okay, if we're in the right mood and things, usually we can sip a whiskey and we can decide, I like this. This is a good wee whiskey. I enjoy this. And you can talk about it as such. You can contextualise it by flavour notes or whatever, but often comparing it to other things. Anyway, let's go on with it. Cheers. First thing I'm going to do is remind you of how we finished the vPub last time around. This has got nothing to do with preference. The vPub at the start of the month was examining these whiskies through the lens of the fact that they were the global best-selling malt brands. The only thing missing from this list is the Monkey Shoulder that I shared on that night. It's at number 5. It's a blended malt. I was focused on single malts, so we talked about Monkey Shoulder, but it meant that Glen Grant, that was sitting out there at number 11, got shunted into the 10th place when we took out the blended malt Monkey Shoulder. Here it is here. I shared it with you. Glenlivet 12 is our undisputed global bestseller. Look at the scales that we have there. 19.8 million bottles of Glenlivet sold globally. Quite incredible. But you can see how much lower it is to actually creep into the Scotch malt whisky top 10. I mean, Glen Grant is sitting there, 3.1 million. So if you're about 3.5 million or so, 4 million mark bottles sold annually, you should be able to creep into the global top 10. Not that that means anything to anybody outside of those producers or companies. We don't care whether it's the best seller on the planet. We are much more interested in whether they're good whiskies or not. You would think that best sellers would be good whiskies, but we know from every other product and every other place that we go, whether it's beer or other alcoholic drinks, whether it's foodstuffs, whether it's clothes or brands or shoes, or it doesn't matter what it is. So much of it is to do with perception, it's to do with brand, it's to do with advertising, it's to do with shelf, retail space, awareness, all of that. I'm here to cut through that with you and talk about quality, flavour, value, engagement, delivery, all of these things. All of these things. They sell a lot of Coors Light too, Aquavitae. Absolutely. If we needed a beer and Coors Light was the only beer available, I'm sure we would be quite happy with it, but it's maybe not what we would choose. Watery Coors Light, you know. It is what it is. Anyway, these were the top 10. These were the whiskies that I shared with you, and here they are over my shoulder. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull in what I never told you at the vPub that we held at the start of June. I didn't rank them that night. I've had time to consider it. How would I rank these? Based on 1 or 2 drams only for some of them. Some of them I've got to know them a wee bit more. Some of them I've got to really quite enjoy. But I've decided to rank them. They are now in the order of how I rank them. It's going to surprise you. Let me help a wee bit by pulling up an overlay in order to help you see these a wee bit. Let me summarize this ever so quickly. Number 10 is the bestseller globally. I've put it in 10th place, Glenlivet 12. It was one of the kind of most, not just kind of flat and dull, but it was not a lot of whiskies in that lineup had things that you could call out as being faulty. And I wouldn't call what the Glenlivet 12 was as faulty, but I would say that it was just not great whiskey, to the point that I'm not wanting to go back and have another glass of it. So it sat out there in 10th place. Unfortunately, for a lot of you Laphroaig fans out there, I'm a Laphroaig fan too. I genuinely, truly am a Laphroaig fan. But that 10-year-old that I opened at the start of June is not representative of what I recognise as Laphroaig. It is dull, flat, watery, boring, very poor, very poor. And it is emulsified within an inch of its life. And I wonder if that's got something to do with the amount of caramel colorant that's used in it today. It's a poor whiskey. I've got other Laphroaig 10s that I've sipped since and that are much better, despite the fact all the Lefroy 10-year-olds core range that I have are all at 40% domestic ABV. 8th place was Glen Grant. There's nothing wrong with this. It's very apple forward, very orchard fruit forward, but just a wee bit light, a wee bit insipid, and it was easy to push it down the pecking order. In fact, it was trading places with the one that's just ahead of it, Aberlour. The only reason that Aberlour has made it ahead of the Glen Grant is that at least it's got a bit of sherry nuttiness, wee bit of sherry spice and things in it. But the Aberlour 12 is pretty dull compared to what you would expect from Aberlour, especially for more kind of sherry cask forward suggestion of flavour. The Aberlour 12 was also a wee bit dull. Talisker was a huge disappointment to me. Likewise, I've got other bottles of Talisker, previous branding bottles of Talisker, for example. Slightly older bottlings that's got much more vibrance to it, much more grip, much more mineralics qualities to it, much more of that kind of a Talisker salt and pepper side to it. The Talisker, and that's the one that I had in the glass tonight. Just put a wee tablespoon of this in the glass. Quite a bit of smoke on the glass, actually, more than I noticed on the liquid, as you tend to find on an empty glass. But again, I was able to confirm tonight that Talisker is, it's almost like everything is going to be, 10 years old. Just as soon as it hits 10 years old, it's in. I'm not going to be putting much older stuff in there, it feels like. And a lot more first fill bourbon. If you're going to be putting out a younger whiskey, and then it's tempting, obviously, to use kind of more active wood. There's much more toffee caramel stuff on this, a wee bit more saccharine sweetness on the finish too. And all of it is a kind of more cloying experience than what I'm used to with that sharp, that vivid, kind of much more precise experience that you would get from Talisker. They often talk about a Talisker catch, especially on the finish from the dryness from the pepper. It's non-existent here at all. It's not in that bottle, unfortunately. A staple around these parts, Glenfiddich 12-year-old makes 5th place here. Still very, very good. It was able to easily stand up to quite easily demolish the Glenlivet 12, honestly speaking. Much more kind of mouthfeel to it, much more roundness to it, much more fruit, much more easier to approach. The big surprise for me was actually the cheapest one. It's made position 4 here. Where is it? It's over my shoulder. Can I reach for this? What betrays how much you're actually enjoying something tends to be the level of the bottle. Not only was I enjoying this myself, but I was quite happy to pour this for other folk and surprise them with the fact that this is Diageo's Singleton. The 12-year-old 40% Singleton of Dufton, this one. But I was really surprised, given this was the cheapest whiskey at £27 on the night. This did reasonably well. This would potentially be replacing my Glenfiddich 12 Permashelf or something. It was really, really that good. Glenmorangie is a Permashelf item around here. I love the pineapple. I love the tropical fruit. I love the ex-bourbon maturation side of it. I love Glenmorangie 10. It's easy to forgive it for being 40%. The quality is not diluted, although the ABV is. I would love to see an ex-bourbon, pure, clean, entry-level product from Glenmorangie, unchill filtered at 46% or something like that. I would pay a tenner more for it. I really would. Love the liquid. Love how clean and pure it is. Second place is a weird one, a very, very weird one. How can I put Macallan in second place when it's £90 a bottle? Well, I'm going to contextualise that by speaking to you tonight and saying, look, if we just go on quality of liquid, if we forget about price, the liquid that came out of that Macallan 12 Sherry Oak is decent liquid. I paid £90 for it. It's not worth that. It is never worth that. There is literally, we are ruined, spoiled, rotten for choice that we can choose ahead of £90 worth of Macallan 12. That is double, at least double, maybe more, what they should be charging for that whiskey. But they are selling based on brand. We are buying and paying for that brand. That's what Macallan's about these days. That said, it remained as just pure liquid, one of the best in the lineup. The only thing that pips it, and I have to caveat this heavily like I did at the start of June, is that Balvenie 12 double wood. Fantastic wee bottle of whiskey. Had another couple of drams out it since, and I can confirm that comfortably makes it up there in front. The caveat is that I've had that bottle on the shelf for a long, long time, despite it being contemporary branding. almost contemporary branding, I've had it on the shelf for a wee while. However, as recently as last year, we were together in the Griffin in Glasgow with a couple of friends, and Malt of the Month was Balvenie 12 Doublewood, and I was immediately reminded of how good it was. You know, £2.53, £4, I don't know how much a dram it was. Malt of the Month, we were absolutely quite happy sipping it. Delicious. We're enjoying each other's company. It's more about the discussion and interacting with each other than it was about the whiskey, but the whiskey was a lovely wee accompaniment. To the point that now when I'm in a pub or a place or a restaurant where they've got Balvenie and not a lot else, quite comfortable ordering it. Much in the same way you might a Highland Park 12 or something like that. Something that you feel is fine. It's just good, solid, decent quality whiskey. That gets #1 spot. It's there for posterity. It's going to be disrupted. It will change tonight because I've got another 10 bottles to be getting on with. The first one is here. Jimmy. I can buy half of a Taylor Swift ticket for £90. I think that's quite cheap. 180 quid, I'm not sure. But yeah, we take your point. Taylor Swift is maybe arguably a once in a lifetime, once in a generation type event, perhaps. Whereas Macallan should be ubiquitous and available all the time. Tom Verbruggen, good to see you, Tom. How's your health? I hope you're keeping well. He's in Balvenie, 12, one of my perma-shelf. Great price versus quality. Glad that we've got some consensus from you, Tom. Excellent. And Inverurie Whisky Shop saying Balvenie is great aquavitae, not just in tasting, but for the accessibility. 12-year-old seems to be a dram that we find is acceptable to most who don't drink whiskey. A perfect hip flask dram. Fantastic. Not going to get much arguments about the Balvenie. I may get a few arguments about Macallan being in second spot. But I think it's very, very easy to remove it from second spot. Make a bit of space for everything else that we're going to get through tonight. And suggest that everything has to be roughly the same concept as what we started off in June. That is ubiquitous, core range, entry-level, mass market, recognizable to everybody and available everywhere most of the time. It's interesting to me that the ABVs, bar a couple of exceptions, are all very low, typically 40%, certainly in the UK. But it's also interesting to me that every single one of them, all of the top 10 bestsellers, have an age statement, double-digit age statement, either 10 or 12 years. So the other 10 that I'm going to try and disrupt that list with has to conform to those same parameters. Age statement, 10 or 12, whatever it may be, similar ABV, ubiquitous, core range, entry-level product, available everywhere. The only thing that's going to be different is that it doesn't get a place in the top 10. I hope that's clear to everyone. The first one I'm going to start with tonight, my first wee dram, my first pour, is it bad to say a guilty pleasure? It shouldn't be a guilty pleasure, it's just a straight pleasure. But it's something that's always around, and I'm going to suggest to you one of the most unique whiskies that I'm going to share with you tonight. But it's not obviously unique, it's not out there, it doesn't go out on any extreme, it's a very subtle type of uniqueness. I love this because the obvious mineralic quality to it. There's a lovely wee bit of, this is very soft, 40% ABV, but there's enough for you to nose and taste aniseed, clove, a lovely kind of quiet, gentle spice, a wee bit of gingerbread, malt, apples. There's going to be apples. There's going to be a lot of orchard fruit discussed tonight. There's no doubt about it. But this is a fantastic wee whiskey. I've always said that it kind of just makes its own way. It's just doing something that's ever so slightly different, and I think that's everything down to the malt base. It's nothing to do with the casks, it's nothing to do with how it's put together or how it's presented. It's the malt itself. This is 40% ABV, it is chill filtered. We don't know that it's natural colour. Most of the other products from AnCnoc says natural colour and chill filtered on the label, but this is their 12-year-old. And they don't say that on the label. So we assume that they at least reserve the right to add colour at times. We know that it's chill filtered, but this is an inexpensive wee whiskey, £33. £40. This is permashelf in the vPub. I don't drink this all the time. I mean, it's very, very difficult to have permashelf products around here now just because of the amount of whiskey that there is. But this is one of these core range bottles that's just a delight. It's unique. It's soft. It's easy. I don't know if it's 43% where you are, but I guarantee you this is going to be definitely enhanced by having a few percent more ABV. This will definitely interrupt this top 10. Would it go into the top 5? Would it go up against the Glenmorangie and the Singleton? I think so. I think it could split those. It's going to be interesting to see. But after I've had everything tonight, I'm going to have to commit to this and come up with an off-the-cuff ranking of these whiskies, and I'll try and do that live and give you a wee bit of a graphic overlay. This has been my whiskey that I've been welcoming you all in tonight, and I think it's a wee cracker. How do you get on with AnCnoc 12? For me, the AnCnoc was the easiest pick from the 20 bottles. Jan Mika is enjoying it. Cal Taylor has seen you walked into a bar on holiday, and they have Balvenie Doublewood at a good price, and you're excited. Aquavitae. It's a great bottle to pour for an American audience, turned a fair few bourbon guys. Perfect, Kyle. I think the quality is not in doubt. Don't forget to close the poll, Aquavitae. I did close the poll, but what I should do is get rid of that message. So I'll remove that message and unpin it. That's cleaned that up, but the poll is definitely closed. Thanks for looking out for me, Harrow. Thank you, buddy. Whiskey Liberation Front, Lee J is saying yes to the yet to try the AnCnoc 12. Need to amend that, Aquavitae. Listen, don't run out. Don't overpay. Don't go out and pay £40 plus for it. It's regularly on offer. Wait till you see it at a good price and then try it. It's definitely an entry-level whiskey, but I think it's subtly unique. I missed the rules, says Inverurie Whiskey Shop. Am I right in thinking the age statement, 40-43% core range? Is there a price bracket? The price bracket takes care of itself. The only outliers, actually, ironically, interestingly, are the Macallan, and the Balvenie's a wee bit expensive too, closer to £50. Macallan is double that again, up to £90 in the UK. You can get it cheaper. But generally speaking, the prices for the rest of them are kind of anywhere between the cheapest is still £27 for that Singleton that I paid, up to anywhere and around. We're going to break into the 40s for one or maybe two tonight, but generally most of them are sub £40. But the pricing is incidental, Mike. Incidental. Road to Drama is saying AnCnoc 12 was the easiest pick. Sorry, I picked that up, Alberto. Good to have you in. And Whiskey with Molly Ben said, having said that, I knocked the Deanston Virgin Oak last week, sipping it now and enjoying it more. I'm a wee bit of a fan. If you're enjoying the standard 46.3% Virgin Oak, get your chops around the cask strength. It's a really fully flavoured malt whiskey. I used to have a reaction to Virgin Oak, and now I'm relaxing about it a wee bit more. Tom Frania is saying from the list, AnCnoc 12 is easily in the top 5, maybe the top 3. It's interesting to see that other people are enjoying its subtlety. We get 43% AnCnoc in the US. Yeah, okay. Keith, good to have you in, buddy. I hope you and your brother are doing well. And I hope you've got a wee bottle of the 12-year-old and you're enjoying it. Sachin is saying, I'm yet to open my bottle of AnCnoc 12. Get it open, Sachin. Let us know what you think. You don't need to do it tonight. I'm not bullying anyone. And Greg is saying, I don't have the AnCnoc 12 at the moment, but enjoy the Peat Heart. And of course, my one and only bottle of the 24-year-old Aquavitae. 24-year-old is a fantastic and again, quite unique and subtle and different whiskey. 140 Canadian, Jimmy says, for the Balvenie 12 here. 65 for the AnCnoc 12. That's a tough sell. That's a tough sell. They're completely different. They're not easy to compare. That's a crazy difference in price. Crazy. I'll leave it to you, Jimmy, to decide. Let's get the next one on the go. Just out of pure coincidence, it's a stablemate of AnCnoc. This is Speyburn. Now, Speyburn is a often talked about product on the vPub, but not because of their entry-level no age statement stuff. By the way, you'll see me talking about none of the their entry-level or even more entry-level non-age stated stuff. Everything I'm sharing with you tonight is age-stated. This has now, in modern times, this has been elevated, these 10-year-old and 12-year-old products. They may be the best sellers because they're the best known, but the producers have had to come in and release a product underneath it to make it more attractive more keenly priced, and that's typically non-age statement. So Talisker's got Sky, for example, and the Storm as well, isn't it? Speyburn has Bradenora. We've got, what have I shared already? AnCnoc, do they have a non-age statement one? I don't think they do, although the peated ones are. But you see my point, that there's been a lot of non-age stated stuff coming in underneath the age stated product. I've stayed away from that tonight. I'm keeping it as a level playing field as I possibly can and focusing on age statements. I've had a Speyburn 10 on the shelf in the last couple of years. I think it's made a recycled review. And I felt, you know, it was all right. But I felt that if you were going to be spending money on Speyburn, that you would be better spending it on the 15 or the 18. Much more expensive than this. The 18 is going to be about 2.5, 3 times the price. The 15-year-old is going to be a clear double the price. And you're not getting double the whiskey, but you are getting double the experience, double the engagement. At 40% ABV, most whiskies tend to kind of come a wee bit unravelled to a whiskey botherer's palate. That diluted 40% ABV is a challenge for us. It can often taste a wee bit watered down. That said, I've come to love the Speyburn releases. I've come to love the distillery. And I'm hoping that this wee 10-year-old stands up not too bad. Let's see how it does against its sibling. We're right into the orchard here. Apple, pear orchard, but there is a nice sweet orange. But quite fresh, so not like a syrupy orange cordial type thing, but more like sweet Satsuma skins, that kind of thing. And we've got a light, bready, nutty, not confectionery, not cake-like, but some warm baked goods, that kind of theme. It's going to be a theme tonight. I remember it being a bit of a theme when we were doing this at the start of the month. Lots of apple and pear, lots of orchard fruit. There's quite a cool edge to this too, like a wee bit of mint or menthol. The nose is quite pleasant, accessible, easy, not particularly complex. Neck pour, so a shy nose, a tight nose, a simple nosing is to be expected, needs time to breathe, but the palate was much better than the nose suggested. Not bold, not deep, not rich, not wee bit of floral mixing in with the fruit. There is sweetness there, but it's a fruity sweetness. It's not a sugary sweetness. It's not a confectionery thing. Faultless. No ugliness brought around by any kind of emulsified flat texture or anything. There's a wee bit of brightness here. It feels and tastes quite pure. It feels balanced. There's not a lot going on in the finish. It fades quite quickly. To be expected. This just tastes like good. I'm going to say it. Smooth Scotch whiskey. It's not in any direction on a cask perspective, just very down the middle, very balanced. Not bad. Nothing to shout and scream about, but absolutely nothing to fail it on. Now, Speyburn, we know, is a worm tub distillery. We've loved the weight, the kind of almost kind of sometimes standing in a wee bit of a Mortlach, guys, for me on some of those 15-year-olds I've had across the years. There's been enough weight there for me to really kid myself that it's a bit like Mortlach. A classic style of Mortlach, I'll go as far to say. The 18-year-old tends to be a wee bit richer, sweet fruit, more decadent, more ripe, more kind of just dialed up a bit. I tend to prefer a little bit more vibrance that the 15-year-old brings, but they're both gorgeous, gorgeous whiskies. I'm not finding a lot of that here. I don't think we're given the potential weight that Speyburn might give us any chance at 40% ABV. It is what it is. Oh, wow. Really vivid, desiccated dry coconut on the finish. Yeah, definitely coconut. Comes in at the end. It's like iced coconut. Almost like a macaroon type thing. Fantastic. That's really quite vivid there. So there is things there that, you know, it's easy to nose these whiskies. The lower ABV is going to help you get your nose in and access them a wee bit. But they tend to be just that wee bit softer on the palate, so you're having to search for things a wee bit more than you might normally. Overall, I think I'm quite impressed with that. Middle of the road. Where do we go next? Let's go to, now this was everywhere at Father's Day. Absolutely everywhere. I ended up buying this online. I didn't pick up any of the Father's Day bottles, but this was £27 at Father's Day. Offers in all of our supermarkets. This is all the ones that I'm going to uncork tonight. You'll notice that I'm taking them out of a box. We'll talk about the box thing a wee bit later. But this is the ubiquitous, the everywhere, the often celebrated Old Pulteney. This is the Old Pulteney 12-year-old. This is darker than some of the recent Old Pulteneys that I've had. I wish I could say that that's because of the cask makeup, but I am going to suggest to you that since they don't put anything on there about colour, that it's more likely to be a wee use of caramel colourant. It's where we are. It's where we're playing in the whiskies. If it is natural colour, I'll apologise, but I think that they should be celebrating that by putting it on the label. Macallan's natural colour, they don't put it on the label. Glengoyne is natural colour, they don't put it on the label. Maybe it's the same for Old Pulteney. Good pop. Still got the wee compass on the top, and I believe that the compass also exists. I can't show you the bottom of the bottle without, yes, there's a compass feature on the bottom as well. And, you know, it's supposed to mimic the stills and all of that. It's a very, very classic bottle of whiskey, and despite the rebranding, it's still got a lot of presence, still got a lot of Old Pulteney about it, although I quite enjoyed when the ship was much bigger and front and centre, but hey-ho, it is what it is. You might remember a vPub a couple of years ago with Ben, Whiskey Geek Ben. Oh wow, did you hear that? Don't even need to pour it to get the sound effects. He sent me a blind sample and wanted me to try it live on air. And I declared that I didn't enjoy it. I declared that it was soapy even. And that's when he shared with me, he said, this is a bottle of Old Pulteney 12. Now, at that time, I was talking loudly about Old Pulteney 12, much in the same way I might talk about AnCnoc 12. Something nice, something that you can recommend, something that you can always keep about and recommend to folk coming into whiskey. And he wanted to show me that batch is very much playing into even something at the scale of Old Pulteney 12. And I was really disappointed with that wee soapy sample that he sent me. His entire bottle was like that. Let's see how we are with today's Old Pulteney. Oh, wow. Clearly I'm looking for soap. I'm looking for a soapy element here. And I would say no. There's a wee bit of potpourri, a wee bit of floral element to it. Like a rosewater Turkish delight type sweet floral element. Pink. Yeah. It's kind of, it was really biscuity as well. Quite shortbread, but caramel shortbread, sweet shortbread. Not a lot of spice, but there is fruit. With Old Pulteney, you're looking for salinity as well. You're looking for that maritime thing that's suggested, right? You're looking for the coastal stuff. When we've got our Islas or Taliskers or Ardnamurchans especially, we've got so many kind of salty, tangy things. Not getting a lot of salt in this. Maybe a hint. It is floral though. Sweet, fruity and floral. Better than expected, but I'll wait. It's amazing how, you know, I'm going to be going through so many different whiskies. You would think you start to confuse your palate, but even with these three whiskies being very, very close, let's say, similar in profile, ABV, very kind of entry level, the contrast, the flavour contrast is marked. It's there. It's quite sweet and dry on arrival. There's a wee bit of saltiness on the finish, to be honest. But after the kind of sweetness and that kind of almost vanilla caramel custard type note in the centre, the development switches quite quickly. And on the finish, there's a bit of a vegetal element. It's not bad. It's like a dry thing. It's grassy. So we're in the herbaceous end of the spectrum here, aren't we? That's quite strange. We're kind of getting all these floral things, and there's a wee bit of that in the palate too. But the development in the second half towards the finish, you get this kind of grassiness. It's a wet grass. It's almost kind of vegetable. There's an aura of, you know, cooking vegetables type thing. It's not off, but we're in that realm. Much better than I expected, though. If I was sitting down sipping this, if I paid £27 for this, if I'd been gifted it for Father's Day and I was sitting there opening it and sipping away in front of the TV, I would be quite content. Despite me trying to articulate flavour to you and contrast into the other two that I've been sipping and talking about kind of grassy notes or things that you might consider off notes, it's objectively a good whiskey. It's not off. It's nothing like that soapy sample that Ben sent me a couple of years ago. There is a floral element to it. It wouldn't take much for that to bleed over into a soapiness, but it's not happening here tonight. But still middle of the road. Jimmy Legacy, I prefer that you say tarragon instead of grass. Grass is a note that annoys some people. Never, ever do I want to be sitting here and talking about or taking away or removing. I've used smooth tonight. if we, I appreciate that you would prefer me to specify something more. So what after I say grassy, I'm going to try, and because there's fresh outdoor grass, there's wet grass, there's dry grass, there's hay, there's 100 ways to describe grass, I'm sure. So yeah, I'll try and do my best, being a fairly blunt instrument that I am, to describe what the grass is. But if somebody just gets as far as grassy, celebrate it, because it's better than them saying nothing. We just have to kind of, we have to allow people as much vocabulary as they want to use. This, you couldn't objectively say this is a grassy whiskey, but there's a grassy lick to it. It's not tarragon. Tarragon's got a very distinct flavour to it. Tarragon leans for me almost onto having a wee bit of an aniseed fennel type lick to it, ever so slightly, kind of moving over to that side of the kind of herbal spectrum. Tarragon to me is quite distinctive. I wouldn't use tarragon for that one, Jimmy, but I'll try and be as specific as I can. Bogdan Avram, good to see you, Bogdan. Man from, Romania, right? The soapiness kicks in if left longer in the glass, in my opinion. Well, I tell you what I'll do, Bogdan, I'll leave it and I'll cover it with that wee evangelist coin so that there's only a wee half a teaspoon left in it, and we'll know that that's the old Pulteney. Interesting that you've picked it up on the old Pulteney too. Jimmy Leggs celebrating being a member for 52 months. That was a reference to an old Dramface podcast. See where you're going with that, Jimmy. This is the trouble, is that people know more about me and remember more about me than I do. I've said far too much. A lot of support coming in from the Barflies. Chris Brooks celebrating being a member for 19 months. Long time no see, fellow Barflies. Aquavite, Chris, always tremendous to welcome you in, and thank you for your support as part of the Barflies. Whiskey Liberation Front, Lee J celebrating being a member for 50 months. Sorry I'm late, hope you're all well. Never late to a vPub, Lee J, but it's brilliant to have you here, buddy. Alistair Gray celebrating being a member for 52 months. Shame the 46% ABV Speyburn 10 is duty free only. If I'd known that, that'd be one to pick up. Maybe I can pick that up before I go off on my holidays this year, Alistair. That would be good. And Jimmy Legg is celebrating being I picked him up saying it was a reference to an old Dramface podcast. Thank you all, Team Dramface, for your support. Absolutely true, says Inferori Whiskey Shop. Aquavite, good is a tasting note to most. Good, smooth, easy, soft, harsh. All these kind of, you need people to start off with buckets, right? And then the buckets become much more and more refined, smaller, more dialed in specific things as time goes on. But just to get people to articulate and talk about whiskey, it takes a wee while. Ian Bruce is saying a freshly creamed fairway divot. A freshly created fairway divot. That's a good one, Ian, a good one. And Whiskey Weekend Drama is saying, the longer in the bottle, the better for me. Neck pour is never the best of the bottle experience. Halfway it is. Harrow, I wouldn't deny that one bit. What we're getting from a neck pour usually is a kind of like an introduction, an amuse-bouche, a handshake, a kind of first impressions type thing. If you're comparing whiskies like I am tonight with open bottles alongside neck pours, you have to caveat it heavily. If you're sitting with half a dozen or more neck pours and you're comparing them all like for like, then things become a wee bit more kind of it's never on an objective plane, but a little bit more in that direction. Anyway, let's motor on. How are we doing? We're 3 whiskies in with an hour gone. I think I can go a wee bit quicker than that. Here is one that is open. Glass 4 in front of me now. A bit of a dry cork here. You just know. Be gentle. Yeah, we're okay. This is, I was going to say the ubiquitous, but this is not nearly as ubiquitous as it once was. This is the Speyside. It says Highland on the label, of course, is from the Grants. This is Glenfacrcla. And this is their 10-year-old. there is a 12-year-old as well, but the 10-year-old tends to be the one that's a wee bit more commonly seen. I remember, I don't know, 12 years ago, 14 years ago, I don't know, the first time anyone ever bought me a bottle of Glenfarclas 10, it just happened to be the first one. It was just superb. Just such a bright, creamy, tropical, fruity bomb. Loved my time with it. Went out to immediately replace it. I rinsed it so quickly and had a completely different experience with the next 10-year-old. It was much more sherried, completely different take. And it was that experience that made me realise just how much batch variation there is. And Glenfarclas has become quite synonymous, or quite infamous, I would say, for batch variation. We can talk about how we want to embrace batch variation in Scotch whisky, single malt whisky. It's a batch-made product. It's matured in an oak cask, which is infinitely variable too. So we've got this kind of strange thing where, you know, canny people are brought in to try and recreate large vattings of casks to try and make the same product time after time. But the whisky is going to play games with us. It's going to want to be a wee bit different time after time. So I have a mixed experience with Glenfarclas. For every cracker that I have, I tend to have something that's bang average, or maybe sometimes a wee bit worse than that. They are a bit volatile. I hope it's okay to say that in my experience, in my opinion. This has got much more sherry. So much more depth and richness here on the nose. Still 40% ABV, much more sherry than I expected in this. Not particularly dark, but probably coloured. No, Glenfarclas actually tells us, thank you. That's great news on the back. I'd forgotten all about this. See up the top there? Natural colour. Love it. Tempting sherry, sweet, malty tones, delicate light hints of dried fruit, long, smooth, and spicy. Fairly generic taste and notes. They are perfect. It is very sherry forward. The dried fruit and a nuttiness is definitely there. Think a wee bit about it's almost like a dried fruit nut mix. It's not boozy fruit. There is quite just a dryness on the nose. Maple syrup, something dark maple syrup, dark honey, something dark and sweet, something luscious. A coffee chocolate. So you can see where the notes are going. You can see that they hint towards a cask style. Sherry casks in this case. First fill, predominantly refill, I would suggest, but they've used some nice first fill casks in this one, I think. Forgotten how good this was. A wee bit of a green spike at the end, a kind of, maybe not green, maybe like a menthol or something like menthol, or a sweet mint leaf, if that makes sense. That's the best so far. 40%, but bags more flavour. Bags more heft, depth, not complex, fairly straightforward and direct, but loud. Got some bassier notes in here. You've got some shape, something to scale this out. Everything's broadened. Everything's red, dark red. There's a richness to it, a plumminess, a jamminess. Some berries. That's a very good sipping whiskey. I would even go as far to say that the extra weight, the extra body that this dram has, it could easily make you feel like you're sipping something with a bit higher ABV, and that's not in any way to suggest that there's any heat or spice to it there. It's just got that mouthfeel. It's just got the text. It's just got more fortitude, more robustness to it. Surprising, because this has sat on my shelf for a long time and been largely ignored. I have been getting through it, as you can see, but this bottle's got to be 18 months, 2 years old, maybe even more. I was ready to say, yeah, it's another kind of pedestrian malt whiskey, but I have to take my hat off. That Glenfarclas has stood up a level based on the first three that I've had. Wow. That's a surprise. That is a surprise. Okay. Let's go on. Let's go on. Jimmy's saying you don't remember Jason throwing a tantrum over using grassy as a descriptor. Would be Jason, wouldn't it? It was very revealing concerning the type of character he is. One of the funniest early Dramface podcasts. That's another great thing about the Dramface podcasts, is that we're at 28 now. I know that they're not very frequent, right? It's very difficult to get, 3, 4, 5 of us together across continents. But they're all there for posterity. You can go right back to 2 years ago when we first started recording. Didn't really know what we're doing. We still don't know what we're doing now, so it's all fine. Jimmy, I'm glad you enjoyed it. And I've got a vague recollection of that. I didn't know it was Jason. Maybe it was Phil. It was Northern Irishman Phil in that night. If I think that might be the one, I might be getting confused though. I hear a lot about batch variation on that bottling aquavitae, says Jimmy. I would suggest it's batch variation in Glenfarclas in a very general sense. Look no further than the 15-year-old or the 105. Dorpass Whiskey saying, speaking of batch variation, this bottle of Deanston 12 I just opened is great. None of the perfumey notes that put many people off at aquavitae. I've been amazed. I've shared pictures on the vPub where I've taken 2 different Deanstons off the shelf and held them alongside each other, and the difference in colour is remarkable to behold. Wonderful to see, because the reassurance there that they're vatting based on flavour rather than trying to get to a colour or anything like that, and then they're not tempted to amplify the lighter colours with caramel colour. It's just fantastic. Deanston, CVH Spirits, that's your owner now, Tobermory, Lechick, Bunnahabhain, all of it. Please keep doing what you're doing. It's just fantastic, and we love it. And Verury's saying, got to head off now, driving group to Speyside tomorrow for some fried drams and a lunch at the Highlander. Oh, I'm jealous, a wee bit jealous, Mike. Have a great weekend, Aquavitae and the Barflies. Thanks for joining in with us tonight. Good luck with your trip tomorrow. I hope it's a cracker. Sounds like it will be. And Herben is saying, as alcohol carries flavour, it's easy for a flavourful whiskey to trick you into thinking it's higher ABV, I think, question mark. I think that's the other way around. It's the ABV that's acting is that kind of flavour carrier, isn't it, usually? But what I'm tasting here is flavour, which is maybe making me think that there's enough flavour there to make me think that there's a bit more ABV. It's not got enough spice in it to make me think 46, 48+%, right? I would probably be sipping that and guessing 43%. That's just because of the richness to it. Good. Number 5 as we motor through this. Where are we going to go now? Well, we're going to start the second half. The second 5 is going to kind of really change things up. We're going to start to get into what I perceive to be much more flavourful, slightly more challenging flavour profile whiskies. But the first 5 are quite kind of soft and gentle. No smoke to speak of for the most part. Certainly no smoke on this one. In fact, it's one of the brand messages that there's absolutely no smoke involved. But I'm now down in the Southern Highlands again, and I'm down at Glengoyne. This is their 10-year-old. Now, I searched about quickly before I went live tonight. I ran out of time, actually, but it popped into my head about Glengoyne 10 that I was pretty sure that this was all ex-European oak, ex-sherry cask. Okay, a mix of refill and first fill, perhaps. But I was trying to find any detail on this label, and I had a quick look around on Whiskey Base and things like that. I was just about to go to Glengoyne's own website. I didn't get a chance to do it, so maybe you can help. Because I felt like the 10-year-old was exclusively sherry cask. But I could be wrong there. I could be wrong. This 10-year-old Glengoyne is the whiskey that started it all for me. 2005, standing at the visitor centre in Glengoyne as a driver with a dram that size just to taste, while everybody else was enjoying themselves having drams. And I tasted a wee sip of single malt whiskey, the first time for single malt whiskey's sake, and all the lights came on. Everything just made perfect sense to me. This is delicious. It's probably came along at the right point in my life as well. I was starting to enjoy being kind of ensconced in my home, staying at home and that kind of thing. And anyway, I became an instant convert. I finished the dram, straight out of the Glengoyne Visitor Centre, straight through the shop, water jug, a bottle of 10-year-old, I think a T-shirt or something, I can't remember now, the whole shooting match. And back home I went, deciding that I was going to enjoy myself some malt whiskey. And that wee bottle of 10-year-old started, my goodness, what a thing it started. However, I've fallen away from Glengoyne since, and I wonder how much of it is me and how much of it is Glengoyne and everything else in between. It's going to be neither and both, isn't it? 40% ABV whiskey, as that 10-year-old was, the first one I bought back in 2005, was hot for me to drink. I remember loading the glasses up, the first glasses that of whiskey I was enjoying, with quite a bit of water. And all of these whiskies tonight are nosing so soft. At 40%, you're still kind of anaesthetizing your senses a little bit. You're still taking the edge off, no doubt, especially when I'm sticking my nose right in the glass. But this is how we enjoy our whiskey at this level. We're not selecting casks. We're not blenders. We're just enjoying the experience from the glass. This is much closer to the Glenfacrcla than the first three. The nose is plump and ripe on this. But over the Glenfacrcla, what it brings is a sharper sense of spice. It's not hot. It's not spicy spice. It's much more like a soft baking spice. Gingers. Not nutmeg, but cinnamon ginger style spice. Oh, quite orangey, quite orange peel, candied spice, just dried orange. Sipping on the back of the Glenfarclas there's brought out a really quite sharp, defined, bright citrus edge, a zest to this. Pith. A wee bit of white, soft, warm white pepper on the finish. But soft at the same time. Light and delicate, a wee bit chocolate, actually. You can just throw it everywhere. Hardly makes the gums tingle at all at 40% these days, but it's there. The ginger cinnamon thing is there on the palate too. This is quite citric. It's quite orangey. sweet orange, spiced orange, but vibrant. There is a sense of a kind of hollowness right in the middle, close to the finish, middle to finish. It's like almost like it just tails because of the ABV. I would suggest the 40% presentation. It just kind of bottoms out a wee bit. It's better than 40% would suggest. It's not an expensive bottle either. Let's give you some prices actually for these. AnCnoc I mentioned is £33. This Glengoyne is a wee bit more, a pound or two more, £35. What else have I had? The Speyburn 10 is probably our cheapest on the lineup tonight at £28 for the Speyburn. That old Pulteney is close to at £28, £29 for that, although I did see it a wee bit cheaper than that over Father's Day and things. And then the other one I had is an expensive one, closer to £40. We would be up at £38, £40, £42 for the Glenfacrcla 10. But it is their best in the lineup tonight, interestingly. This is a whiskey that you would give to somebody a bit like me back in 2005, right? And they would just be like, oh, wow, there's no harsh, jagged edges on this. There's no roughness about this. This is smooth and soft and gentle and easy and drinkable. And there is flavour to it. Wow, a big hit of malt barn, just pure malt. Big cereal hit right in the centre. It's funny as I'm speaking, you know, the air's coming in and out perhaps, and it was just that a wee bit that malt hit me a wee bit like the coconut did on I think the second one I had tonight. Again, the finish on all of these, the finish on everything that I've had tonight, the uniform thing here that's happening here, is quite a short finish. You have the sense that you've sipped whiskey, but there's not much flavour lingers for very long. The Glenfarclas and the Glengoyne is probably the most kind of communicative for the longer time, I would suggest, but not by much. One of the downsides of the ABV. Sachin is saying the only Glengoyne I've ever had is the teapot dram after I saw the Whiskey Friend review it, and it was lovely. Yeah, Sachin, you know, we're up at the teapot dram, 59%, 60% ABV of that order. A really, really different take. Young, vibrant Glengoyne, sometimes into the double ages. You know, 10, 12, I don't know, years of casks. But often they're picking 7, 8, 9-year-old for that as well. Used to love it. It got quite pricey in the end. Whiskey 2525, that looks like a new name. Good to welcome you in. Older bottles of Glengoyne 10 are so much better and not too expensive at auction. Much better than the current stuff. Don't we find that quite a common thread, generally speaking? The interesting thing is tonight, for the most part, with very few, in fact, no exceptions tonight, everything that I'm going to be sipping, whether it's an open bottled or uncorking a new bottle, is contemporary, very, very recent purchases. At the start of the month, not so much because the Bulveni was quite an old one. But I hear what you're saying, Whiskey 2525. We'll just call you Whiskey 25, will we? Nice to have you in, and I agree with your sentiments, not just in Glengoyne. Tom, Whiskey and Wine Trails, good to see you, buddy. Actually poured the Glengoyne 12 at 43% tonight prior to the vPub. Not challenging, but quite feet up and relaxing. A pleasant $55 Aquaviti. And that's the thing, if you're not paying too much for it, you're not really expecting a lot out of the bottle. Brian Stormont saying, I get what you mean on Glengoyne. I got to the end of my third bottle and I loved it, but I didn't replace it again. I have to say, maybe with a slight shout for the Glenfarclas, despite how much of a soft spot I've got for Speyburn, AnCnoc, I'm not, and sipping them the way that I'm sipping them tonight, I'm not saying I need to get another bottle of these. With the exception of that Glenfarclas, perhaps. Interesting, Brian, right? We look at the levels in the bottle to betray how we really feel, and we look at how much our desire is to have the bottle replaced when we finish it. That's the true betrayal of how much we're enjoying whiskey, I think, because often it can be quite a subconscious thing. Reb is here, good to see you, buddy, saying Aquavitae, I'd say the AnCnoc 12 has the longest finish of any 40% ABV I know. Let's have a wee sip of our AnCnoc 12. There's still plenty in the glass, Red. What a contrast. So from the fruity, round and ripe Glenfacrcla and Glengoyne, I go back in as I'm sipping it, I just get a really sharp, clean, you know, the kind of clove and aniseedy type thing I'm talking about, but alongside it, a nice, sharp, defined lemon note. Whereas it was orchard I was getting earlier, wasn't it? Like a clean, waxy lemon. This is what you need to do. It doesn't matter whether it's 40% or 60% whiskey that you're sipping. When you're taking your time, and it's going to be even better if you're not distracted with, you know, hosting a session, you're right. If you're just being able to sit on your own and daydream and take time in between sips and contrast, that's an incredible difference. And I'll go in to this wee old Pulteney and see if we get any. Oh, aye. It is, the floral has been amped up. It is a wee bit soapy. Ah, wow. Watch what you sip old Pulteney in contrast with. That's interesting. It's just right back. Wow. Okay. It's like having a Galaxy bar, says Ian Bruce. He's talking about Glengoyne compared against the Galaxy Caramel Glenfarclas. It's good, but just missing that something else. That's a very good way of putting it, Ian. I like it. And George Ellis saying Glengoyne 10 is 43% in the US and reasonably priced at $45. George, like so many other things, you're getting export strength, and you should celebrate the fact that that's happening. $45 is a really, really good price for it too. Phil Jones is here. Good to see you, Phil. One of your comments after the early June videos was, okay, it wasn't quite this probably that you were looking for. I think Phil was more kind of a thinking, what would we do to edit our top 10? What would we take out and put in? But we would replace it with Arran 10 and Craigellachie 13 and Deanston 12 and Bunnahabhain 12, Lechic 10. That we would be putting all of those things in. The things that we know are much, much more flavorful, much more depth, complexity, much more, you know, life about them. We would be swapping all of those out. But that's easy, and we do that on a lot of vPubs, and we'll do it in the future. What I'm trying to do is focus on this vPub, Phil, and I hope it fits with your sentiment, the idea that you had, is that we try and keep the parameters the same and see how we disrupt our top 10 bestsellers by taking some things that don't get as much volume sales and seeing if they can break into this top 10. Donald Pastor Tim, good to see you, saying AnCnoc vintage releases can be quite good. They really need a core range bottle between the 12 and the 18. There's rumours. Fingers crossed the return of the 16. There's rumours. Jimmy Legacy saying the ability of one whiskey to affect another while drinking them simultaneously is one of the things I don't like. It falsifies what the whiskey actually is for me. Everyone is so different. And Jimmy, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm contradicting you a lot, buddy. I love that you're here and I love the colour that you add and these opinions and things that you share. Whatever you taste, you taste. And if you decide that you're not enjoying what you taste because you're confusing things or you're tasting things in contrast and one falsifies the other or something, you don't continue, you don't do that. I love it. I love what sipping one whiskey can bring out in another whiskey and vice versa. And I love that kind of contrast thing. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes one whiskey after another, it can be jarring. One whiskey can overpower or underperform or let another whiskey down or anything in between. But sometimes it's nice to know that. And it brings out other things that you would not have picked up if you were sipping it in isolation. But it's just my experience there. Well, Anderson Glengoyne has a first fill 10-year-old travel retail exclusive at 46%. Sadly, it's 70 quid. That's pricey. That's hellish pricey, and it's one of the problems I have with Glengoyne, specifically Glengoyne. This 10-year-old is inexpensive, but you go up to their visitor centre, what you'd have to pay for it is much, much, much more, and that goes right across the whole range. They're not the only ones that do it, though. MG Rod, in the same contrast, reveals so much about whisky. He's currently doing the same with 3 of Signatory's Divil Deanstons at 64% plus. MG Rod, perfect Divil Deanstons. One of them is actually 66.6% ABV from Signatory as well, which is really interesting how they got that name, Divil Deanstons, right? All right, how are we doing? An hour and 25 in, still got 5 whiskies to go, and they get a wee bit more interesting now. So let's push these off to the side. It's going to get tricky when I have to do these re-ranking things, but we'll get through it, right? It's the vPub. Let's switch up to a brand that's kind of found favour with a lot of us. 8 years ago, 6 years ago even. It's not a lot of us were talking about Loch Lomond, but these days we're jazzed about Loch Lomond, aren't we? And that's because of the fun that they're having with us. They're bringing us good whiskies, good quality whiskies, a lot of integrity about them, a lot of flavour about them at very, very reasonable prices. We're just excited about it. The standard 12-year-old lineup of Inchmore and Inchmore and the standard Loch Lomond 12-year-old are all 46% and unchill filtered. However, they've got the Loch Lomond Classic, is it called, or Original? Or they've got a classic and an original. I think they've got 2 that are non-age statement. These are sold through supermarkets mainly. Likewise, this one is also typically a supermarket sale. This is the Loch Lomond 10-year. This comes in below the 12-year-old, would say. This is quite a dusty bottle. It comes in below the 12-year lineup. Much more, they're kind of more premium, more integrity presentation. But this one is kind of above the non-age statement ones. And that tends to be how it's priced, but this is not an expensive bottle of whiskey. It's usually, today, Loch Lomond's about £34, that price. Today, I paid £25 for this. I got this on offer. It was just a Nile cruise type thing. It was there, and I picked it up. I think it was a part of the Father's Day offerings at the start of the month. With a mind that I was going to be doing something like this, I was able to pick it up. Quiet wee pour. Just put a wee tablespoon in from our Loch Lomond. Now, I don't know if I'm put off by the bright orange labelling. It seems to, the oranginess seems to bleed into the liquid, right? Now, there's no doubt that there will be caramel colourant used in this one. There is a 10-year age statement on it, which is great. And it will be chill filtered at 40% ABV. It is 40%, yes. This is my first time with this bottle. Love Loch Lomond whiskies. Don't love 40% presentation. Don't love chill filtration. Do not enjoy colourant, as you know. Let's see how the pretty robust spirit of Loch Lomond stands up to that treatment. Lots of fruit on the palate, a bright green apple fighting with citrus. Things are quite sharp. Things are quite defined and sharp. There's a grittiness here. Apple pear, bright citrus. Fresh, green. It's white. There's a white sense to this, and it's not floral. It's kind of a sweet white sugar, creamy, almost like a sense of a cool. What is that? Sometimes, I would be going towards kind of an outdoor kind of clean linen type thing, but it's not quite that. It's maybe just like an apple blossom. Oh, wow, that's weird. If you can imagine creamy grapefruit, maybe something like that. That kind of light whipped fondant cream and grapefruit. It's there. Wow, it's strange though. But this is quite citric. Fresh, fruity. Cheers. Oh, flavour. Big sack of flavour. Completely different to anything we've had. Very fruity. Lots of everything. All the fruit has been dialed up. If you like fruity whiskies, you're in this. But there's a big bag of kind of sweet, creamy vanilla hits at the same time. Finish just falls off a cliff. Just finish dies very, very quickly. Let's go in again. Let's have another wee sip. That's just a crazy thing. You've got this really kind of almost dessert-like fondant creaminess thing going on, sitting next to these vivid, sharp, zesty fruits. I'm always looking for grapefruit in Loch Lomond. It's something that I find in almost all of their expressions. There's this slightly dialed up, sharpened bitterness that always comes across like often a sweet but bitter grapefruit. But we've got a dessert element to this. You have to keep going back again because the finish, it's kind of evaporates. The arrival's huge. So much fruit, big fruit basket. Quick flash of spice in amongst those. Vanilla cream. Yeah, custard cream. Vanilla cream, fondant, that kind of thing. For 40%, there's quite a hit of flavour on the arrival for this. Tails off quite quickly. I mean, I can still taste it, but there's not much hanging around. It's kind of, there's not much that I can really dial into. £25. I mean, it's leagues ahead of that old Pulteney for similar money and 2 years younger. I wonder if the sense of creaminess or whatever is, no. Look, it's gone. Wow. I would pour another. But I've got 10 drams to get through. It's the only one I've finished. It's the only one I've managed to finish. And I finished it quite quickly. I think it's an interesting whiskey. I think if you were sipping it in isolation, it would be difficult to parse out what that unique element is. But sipping it in contrast to other things, I think it's a whiskey of two halves. That bright hit of big fruit, creaminess develops, a wee dash of spice, and then it just kind of falls at the end. Just a tiny wee kind of background noise on the finish. Still, we've got an age statement on a 40% whiskey for sub £30. I picked it up for 25, as I say. I think the retail on it is floating around somewhere in the order of 30 to 34, that kind of thing. Not an expensive whiskey, and a fair bag of flavour for it too. Pretty decent. In the context of the whiskies that we're sipping tonight, of course. Okay. Ian Bruce is saying, is it like granola with fruit and yogurt? Yeah, it's definitely got that kind of fruit and creaminess thing to it. Granola, I don't think I would go in the granola direction, but I hear where you're coming from. Imagine kind of orange segments or grapefruit segments or something with a dollop of yogurt. That's a better way to describe it. Alan Smith is saying, and a wee bit of vanilla poured over it. Alan Smith is saying better splashing, an extra £8 on Loch Lomond 12. Alan, I think this is where I imagined that we would go tonight. And you know where we went at the end of the session that we did at the start of the month. So yes, we are thinking alike. Daisy's here. Good to see you, Daisy. Evening, Roy and Barflies. Just home, need to get a dram poured. Don't hang around. Don't waste any time, Daisy. Get your feet up, get something in the glass, and it's nice to have you here. Glad to welcome you in the door. I hope you're rested. Nick Keane is saying Penny is back from the Foo Fighters. It might be time to sleep. Catch you on the replay. Fantastic. I hope you had a fantastic night at the Foo Fighters, Nick, down in Birmingham, and I hope that the rest of your trip is everything that you want it to be, buddy, and we'll hear from you, no doubt, when you're back in New Zealand next week, maybe with a coffee early in the morning. Great stuff. All right. Where's Roy has changed his name for tonight, it looks like. Where's the value, Roy? Good to see you, buddy. My pal in Norway, switching his name up to keep it topic appropriate. Absolutely love it. All right, let's keep motoring before we reveal what you guys have decided your top 10 would be. I'm going to quickly shuffle around my ranking based on nothing more than the tiny drams that I'm pouring tonight. What should we do? I think the 4 ones that we've got left are anticipated things. But here's an interesting one. Let's just get it done. Let's just get on with it. I have a bottle of Jura. I've got a few bottles of Jura on the shelf. Not a few, maybe 2, 3, 4. 2 or 3 are independent. I've had an official Jura on the shelf for a long, long time. This isn't sold anymore. This is still sealed, though, so it's not relevant to talk about tonight. But this is a 12-year-old at 40% ABV. This is the Jura Elixir. I don't know how I came about this, a gift or something, but I've had it for years. It's just never been opened. But I'm trying to keep it contemporary tonight. And I didn't need to pay a lot for this Jura. 30 quid. From Jura 10, it was cheaper than that on offer for Father's Day. I didn't pick it up, but as we got closer to tonight, I decided that I couldn't really do this topic tonight without. When else am I going to tear into a Jura? Let's be honest. Jura gets a really hard time by the kind of whiskey loving community, by whiskey geeks, whiskey botherers, and things. And I want to defend Jura, but I also want to defend the critique against it too. There's a reason for it. You go and visit Jura as a distillery. It is just gorgeous. People there are fantastic. It's idyllic even. You know, you feel so completely remote as you could ever feel visiting a decent-sized distillery, honestly. It's fantastic. And you feel welcomed there, and it's just a fantastic thing. You want to connect with it. And then what you find is put into these official releases, especially the lower price point things, the non-age statement, the 10-year-old, the 12-year-old, in my experience, has always been a wee bit odd and jarring and a wee bit of a disappointment. But I know nothing when it comes to being a success and selling lots of whiskey. I know nothing about that. Jura know a lot about that. Jura, in the last 5 years, have become the top best-selling single malt Scotch whisky in Britain. In Scotland, I believe it to still be Glenmorangie and their 10-year-old. We want to have a glug. How would we? Let's go that way. No, that just made it fall out without any glug at all. That's me being silly. The first comment that I want to make is just look how dark this is. This is by far, I don't know if the camera is going to pick it up. This is absolutely by far the darkest whiskey that we've opened so far. There might be one that could match it a wee bit later on for colour, but this is the darkest. And I'm holding it the deep ways, but even shallow, you can see how dark this whiskey is. I would love for that to be natural, but it's not. It's from White and Mackay. White and Mackay are the world's worst, maybe closely followed by Beam Suntory when it comes to dosing things up with far too much caramel colouring. It's not a good start. I seem to be spilling a lot of whiskey tonight. Might not be a bad thing if I've got a glass of caramel in front of me, right? It smells of wood. There's fruit here. There's that kind of maraschino cherry type sweet fruit thing. But the big hit that you get is like, it's a nice smell. It's a very nice smell. You would want your room or your house maybe to smell like this. It's like oak and polished oak and cedar wood. It's almost got an incense quality to it. And lots of sweet confectionery candied fruit. And an oiliness like a creosote maybe. Wood shed type. Wow. Tobacco. On the nose, there's nothing particularly jarring or off-putting. Even the citrus side is even quite confectionery too. Candied orange. Orange sweets, orange boiled sweets. Fantastic. Okay. When did we last have a Jura on the vPub? Let's go. Cheers. Okay. There are clearly millions of people across the world sitting down, happily sitting back, purring like whiskey-filled kittens, enjoying their glasses of Jura, non-age statement 10, 12-year-old, and everywhere beyond. Who am I to take anything away from their experiences? If I was sitting down and I was, imagine sitting at a beach or at camping or in somebody's house or sitting down and we were just sitting, sharing and drinking a bottle of Jura, you know, you'd go on with it fine. You'd be okay with it. But, and here's the kicker, everything that I was picking up on the nose is here, but it is crushed. It's crushed, suffocated by a syrupy, okay, thick, almost verging on bitter, but somehow kind of sickly sweet. Saccharine sweet. You know that way you've had sugar-free gum and you've been chewing sugar-free gum, and that kind of strange kind of mouthfeel and flavour that's the saccharin leaves, or if you have a saccharin sweetened mint or something, you can detect that it's not sugar that you're enjoying. The sweetness is coming from something else. It's a saccharin note, and that's the finish for this. Is saccharin sweet. It's like you've had the concept of something sweet, but it's not actually sweet. It's bitter, and it's suffocating all of the the other things that I was looking for, that confectionery fruit, the kind of woodiness, the kind of dirtiness, the oiliness. You know, there's a feeling to it, a kind of gloop or a syrupy thing on the arrival that could make, that gives the impression of being rich or something. But I can see why this is challenging to so many people. It's a bit sickly. Is this caramel colorant? Is this the emulsification of caramel colorant? Is that kind of bitterness from caramel colorant? Is that what it is? Is it just that, you know, Jura is quite a unique, oddball spirit? I know even the indies that I have are not run-of-the-mill. They are very oddball, sometimes a wee bit challenging even, but challenging in a very good way, a positive way, an interesting way, a curious way. This is challenging in a, do I really want another glass kind of way? Now, I appreciate that the whiskies that I drink most of the time tend to be very, very, you know, I'm a whiskey geek. This is catering to a completely different audience, and they are blindingly successful at it. But they're doing it to a price point. They're selling it because they're putting it in supermarkets, and they're selling it high volume at low price with razor thin margins, I suspect, which doesn't leave a lot of room for quality. So it's impressive that they've managed this, but I don't feel like pouring another glass of it. I still haven't opened that Jura's own 16-year-old Jura, says Jimmy Legg. I think I've had it for 15 years. The Jura's own was a hugely celebrated. So Jura is somebody who lives on the Isle of Jura, so it's their own, a 16-year-old expression. I remember back in the day, that 16-year-old was £40, something like that. Very inexpensive back in the day for a 16-year-old. I remember having a bottle. I remember having a Superstition. I remember having the one that had the prophecy. I remember this. So the Superstition was a really cheap one. Prophecy was a wee bit more kind of premium. Jura's own, I say, was a 16-year-old age statement. Back in the early days, I tended not to go back for replacement purchases. Tom Freeney is saying the last year I remember on the vPub was a Cadden Heads bottle. I bought it and was underwhelmed. Even as an independent, I'd say we could put our money elsewhere, says Tom. I wonder, did I have a Cadden Heads Jura on the vPub? I don't have a Cadden Heads Jura on the shelf, or do I? Maybe a white label one. Was that a white label? Could be. Peter Finnecane is in. Good to see you, Peter. Jura sell a lot of caramel whiskey. I think they do. I think they generally do. White and Mackay generally do, honestly. You know, let's not talk about Fettercairn, who's moving in a great direction right now, putting natural colour statements on the label as well. Really excited about what's coming out of that tropical nature that's been brought out of Fettercairn. I love to see it being harnessed. Tam Navulin remains a budget whiskey, and Dalmore remains, caramel in a bottle, I would suggest. It feels like that to me. Willie Buchanan is saying, hi, Roy. Maybe all that caramel. Whiskey 25 is saying Jura appeals to today as the general consumer wants cheap and sweet. Modern palates are so conditioned to super sweetness. It's shocking. I think you are not wrong. It's difficult to argue with that sentiment, definitely. I didn't pay much for it, says Jimmy Legg. He's talking about his Jura's own. I'll bring it over for you then. And Lucky Luke is saying, my favourite thing is to fall asleep to Roy's voice talking about whiskey. My wife is always surprised in the morning. I'm still watching this. Thank you, Roy. Lucky Luke. It's nice to welcome you, and I think it's the first time I've welcomed you. And I have often been complimented on my ability to cure all sorts of states of insomnia. And I'm glad I'm able to do it for you too. Paul Gibbs is saying, we've had a couple of indie Juras at Bilston Whisky Club. Both struggled in the lineup. So it might just be an affliction. It might just be a general affliction. Like I say, they tend to be, and from indies, they tend to at least be interesting. Okay. I've done it. I've done the Jura thing. I have to say, I was hoping that we could get a surprise, or it was a wee bit of a challenge. let's switch it up. Completely switch it up. If we take Jura, that's kind of often avoided in our community, I feel really bad about saying that, I really do. Let's talk about a distillery that's often celebrated in our community, especially in recent years, despite the fact that we're still at relatively low ABV on this one. You probably tell by the red top what I'm about to bring up. If I put together a kind of lower ABV entry-level product and didn't talk about Benromach's 10-year-old tonight, there would have been mutiny in the vPub, right? I have to talk about Benromach. Why? Well, because we all go on and on and on about it, how it's the best kind of lower ABV product, the best entry-level product, lovely, lovely, unique flavour, all this. We recommend it, we talk about it, we celebrate it. We wish it was higher ABV, of course we do, like all the whiskies I'm having tonight. But with this Benromach, we're talking about sub £40 typically, and a really, really quite unique flavour profile. We're not going to get a glug out of this, no point in holding up to the mic. Let's pour a wee tablespoon of this. That's probably the biggest dram I've poured tonight. I'm keen, am I not? Benromach, their contrast series, fantastic. No age statement, but they've got vintage statements on them, so we can easily tell the ages. Lots of variation, lots of experimentation, lots of fun through their contrast series. Easy to recommend. 15-year-old, 21-year-old, and a 10-year-old I've got in my hand tonight are all 43% ABV. They're big hitter now. You have to pay about £60 to get a hold of it, maybe sometimes a wee bit more depending on where you are. Is their cast strength. Again, a vintage statement cast strength. They bring out various batches in any given year, and they tell you which batch it is, batch 1, batch 2, whatever. And they've got the vintage statement on it. They do triple distillation. They do heavily peated. They do organic. Considering how tiny they are as a distillery, they're into everything. And despite me talking to you throughout nosing this glass, there is more to talk about in this glass on this nose than any other whiskey I've put up to my nose tonight. It's rich. You know the thing I was talking about on the Jura, the kind of workshed creosote thing, that's here. But it's kind of fruity nature to it. There's a dry cranberry thing. Sharpness, gooseberry maybe. But most of the fruits, you're drawn to the red spectrum. Jammy, tobacco, wow. Citrus, sweet citrus. All the while you've got this kind of sense that there's an industrial, farmy maybe a farm. Leather chamois, oily rags, that kind of vibe. Super complex, ridiculously complex. 43% whiskey, fantastic. This is the whiskey that you just sit. You're not doing this. You're not just mindlessly drinking the bloody stuff. You're sitting, beguiled, seduced, ready. You're at its feet. This is not a drink. This is a visceral thing. The contrast is clear. It's jumping out the glass, and it's not just about the 43%. It's not that extra 3%. Make no mistake. The Talisker is 45.8. Talisker that before I went live tonight. Okay, cheers. Oh, come on. It's me. I'm at the vPub. I do what I do, a whiskey bother, a whiskey geek and things like that. I'm pandering. I'm preaching to the choir. You know, we all know. But the flavour is a big smack of flavour. So imagine the flavour that arrived with that Loch Lomond. but it's dialed up a notch or two, and it's hanging around. Maybe that's the ABV that's helping it hang around. But there's just so much happens that it's one of these kind of, where's the pause button? How do I stop here so that I can focus and try and articulate why is this different? Is this simply because I'm sipping it on the back of the other whiskies? Or is this a different prospect? I think it's just a different prospect. It would be fascinating to do this blind. Because this would, I feel like tonight, this would stand up like a naked man with his hair on fire. It would be so obvious that this is a completely different animal from everything else that I've had up to now. Springbank, I always have the feeling that Springbank bring this kind of density, this depth, this extra kind of funkiness through their floor maltings. It's the only thing I can put my finger on. We don't have that at Benromach, but there's a kind of handmade, earthy depth and density to things. If you're going to have one whiskey on your shelf, if you're a militant, natural, integrity whiskey buff, you're going to have nothing on the shelf that's been chill filtered. You're going to have nothing that's had caramel added. You're going to have nothing, therefore, that's less than 46 points of ABV, unless it's a natural cast strength, that natural concentration of flavour that happens without dilution. If you're that type of militant whiskey botherer, you still have to make room for this whiskey. It's still remarkably inexpensive, sub £40. Okay, going to a bricks and mortar retailer, £40–45 you'd have to pay for it. I don't think you're going to be upset. I'm going to go one further. If we talk about our Craigellachs, our Deanstons, our Bunas, our Arons, this at 43 can go toe-to-toe with those. It's heartbreaking of what it could achieve at 46, right? We see it in the Contrast series. But this is so much more crafted. Rich orange citrus, tobacco. The type of whiskey that you'd be very, very happy sitting, sipping, but would distract you from conversation, from watching TV, whatever it is you're doing, on the nose as well. An immersive, intense, cracking wee bottle of whiskey. I hoped that it would stand up. I didn't expect it to stand up like that. I didn't expect it to scream and shout like that. Quite amazing. Ian Bruce is saying, will the Jura have an influence over the Benromach flavours? Well, I think it's only flattered that. Eloy Pinheiro, good to see you, Eloy. He's saying Benromach is the Springbank of Speyside. That's the common kind of thing. It's almost becoming a cliche now, but it's understandable why it has become so. Lots of weight and texture in the liquid. Lucky Luke is saying, thanks for the welcome. Amazing content. I watched almost all the vPub streams. Hope to see more cool guests in the future. Well, next week is a solo effort where I talk about the best of the year to date so far, and I'm still working through what that list is going to be, switching up all the time. And then the last vPub before the summer break, Luke, is going to be a gamified version, vPub flavoured, you only need 5 whiskies type theme. And I'm hoping to get together a very specific group of people that it's rare to get us together in order for that one. Fingers crossed. Guests after summer, I think. Well, I mean, it's a guest session before we break up, but I'm glad you enjoy the guest sessions too. Karsten is saying the Benromach 10 would be easily my absolute favourite out of your list, even at 43% ABV. Well, it's going to be interesting to see what you have voted for as a community. I've frozen that now. Nobody can. So what I'm saying now is not affecting the poll that has been happening throughout today. But I suspect the Benromach is going to be up there. Lolander is saying That's a sight I'd rather not see. I'm not sure what you're referring to there, Lowlander, whatever I was saying at the time. And Jimmy Legg is saying, what is Benromach doing that we don't understand? As close to Coquerin as any other. Interesting. I mean, I know they talk about handmade and things, but I need to appreciate what that actually means. I hate to agree with you, as you know, but Benromach is damn good stuff, says Jimmy. I'm glad that you're here to agree with me. It means that the impact that when we do agree is even more. David is saying, why is Edredor 10 not in this lineup? Is it because it's an entry-level product with above entry price or something in the theme I'm forgetting? No, David, I think what we will be able to do is maybe not immediately. We've closed out June and opened June with this theme, but maybe in a year's time, we'll be able to pick up some of the other potential disruptors. I think you've got a great shout with the Edredor 10, but there's talk of that getting bumped up in presentation in the future. That's a 40% product, by the way, and it is a bit more expensive, but people do love it. It's delicious. Highland Park 10 isn't here. Highland Park 12 isn't here. As I mentioned earlier, Auchentoshan 12 isn't here. And if I went through all the distilleries that we have in Scotland with core range products, there's going to be lots of age-stated products that are designed to do something similar to these that is not going to get a mention. I could be going on till 4 a.m. and cover them all, right? You don't want that, and my liver doesn't want that. So I will get to it, David, but you make a good point. It's a good thing to mention the Edredor 10. We have only 2 more to go. I think it's going to be a big, big ask for the last 2 to get close to that Benromach, but I've left enough in the glass in order for us to see if it can happen. I've been quite organised tonight. Got a nice kind of fan arrangement going on here. Hey, let's go back to Loch Lomond Group for this one. But this is the only Campbelltown whiskey that's in our lineup. Springbank 10, of course, is an entry-level product. It's 46% ABV. It's like the Arran 10. It's like Craigellachie's 13. It's an obvious pick. But Glen Scotia, part of Loch Lomond Group, also attack the volume market too. Supermarket sales, price point products, volume products. Why? Well, Loch Lomond is a big outfit. It's a big company. They make a lot of whiskey. They don't make a lot of Glen Scotia. There's not a lot of Glen Scotia around, but they're obviously working really, really hard to raise the profile of the Glen Scotia brand, to let people know that it exists, that it's in production again, that it's in rude health, and that it's a Campbelltown whiskey that we can afford. This is interesting, because this is a Glen Scotia with an age statement on it that I paid £30 for. £30 for a Campbelltown whiskey at 10 years old. I'll hold it up and I hope that it can focus on there, but you'll see that this Glen Scotia is, well, the camera doesn't like the blue colour of it, I don't think. I'll do my very, very best, but it doesn't want to focus on that. See if I do that. Oh, it did it there for a second. You see that? You see? There we go. It's there you go. You can see 40% ABV, 40% for a Campbelltown whiskey. A lot of people would think that quite wasteful. That's where they are. We have to think about it as a business, I guess, like so many other of these producers here. 40% ABV is where it's at in order to get out there at the price point. It's quite a pretty thing. It's quite an attractive bottle of whiskey in the flesh. Quite a nice colour of blue, kind of teal blue-green colour. Quite a flat label. A little bit of kind of metallic embellishment on it, but, you know, price point. Classic Campbelltown malt, matured in first fill bourbon barrels, fruit and gentle spice. I have to say that before, I have not tried this whiskey. I've not had it near my face before. 40% put me off when it was launched. I love the Glen Scotia double cask, 46% ABV. The rum cask is a fully natural whiskey as well. They've got the PX cask double cask as well. Then they've got, I mean, there's another 40% called the Campbelltown Harbour non-age statement, which comes under this one. Then if you go up the range, you've obviously got Glen Scotia Victoriana, you've got the 15-year-old, and it goes kind of up from there. So we're kind of well looked after, more or less, when it comes to Glen Scotia and a core range. I always felt frustrated as a whiskey botherer that Glen Scotia would put out a 10 age statement and not make it natural. However, like I say, they're clearly trying to build a presence and a brand. Price point does that. This is the first nosing that I'm ever going to have of this Glen Scotia 10. Quite shy. At first, it's a neck pour. Butterscotch, vanilla, chewy toffees. There's a fantastic top. I just not had it in years, but suddenly a huge. We had a confectionery in the UK. It was a soft toffee. It came in a tube of little individual toffees called toffos. I think they're long gone, but fantastic things. But they were quite a sweet, light, creamy toffee, like a butterscotch nature. And that's what we have here. Lots of vanilla. There is spice here. The spice is like a wood spice. Let's go with wood spice. And there is a sense of woodworking type going on, like a wood dust, wood sanding and things. Maybe a wee bit of kind of pencil shaving type effect. I'm looking for funk, a funkiness, but it's not really here. There's no real kind of that. If we consider that there's a Campbelltown funk, I don't think it exists in all whiskies from Campbelltown. It's not here. There isn't a funky quality to this. And if there's a salty element, it's like a salted caramel, almost like an ice cream sauce. And there's a clean mint green. A leafy quality. And a powder, like it's maybe more of the spice. Pretty complex and pretty promising on the nose as it's opening up. I could do with a wee drop of water, so I might just see how this one opens up with a wee drop in it if it's shy. Cheers. That's got some flavour. That's, despite that being a wee bit shy on the nose, I mean, I was still able to do okay. Just putting a few wee drops in to try and kind of wake up the nose on this a wee bit. There's lots of flavour there. Lots of flavour. Again, we're still in a citrus theme. Vanilla caramels. The toffee thing is very prevalent. I think what I've done is I've spiced it a wee bit by adding a few drops of water. It feels like I've added a pepperiness to the spice. Soft pepper though, warm pepper. Specs are the same as everything else. 40% ABV, 10-year age statement, but there's a sense that there's just a slight elevation here. I don't know if it's me implying that on the whiskey because I want to love it because I love Glen Scotia already, but there is clear flavour here. It's not got the longest finish. I'm going into the Benromach now. Oh, wow. Aye, listen, the Benromach has still got much more volume about it. There's much more there's much more of a spread. It's obvious. It's very obvious on that Benromach. I don't think it's fair. I think it's more than just that 3% thing. I really do. Is it just the fact that it's 43? Can you imagine what that Benromach would be like at 46? My goodness. If you were to sip it alongside other Glen Scotias, the double cask, for example, the Victoriana, which is a flavour bomb, I think the intensity of those would show this up as being Campbelltown light, definitely. However, in this company tonight, this is better. This is this is elevated. And I wonder what that is. Maybe because it's exclusively first fill bourbon, perhaps. Certainly lots of toffee caramel. It's quite modern. It's quite a modern whiskey. Those flavours that you get these days. Richer, sweeter toffee caramel and things. But there's a nice kind of... There's a balance to this. Slight dryness. And it's not thick. It's not cloying. There is a wee bit of my heart breaks though. Glen Scotia at 40%. I wonder how this would behave. Not only higher ABV with an extra 6% of ABV, but that extra ABV would also mean that it would be non-chill filtered and yada, yada, yada. You know the stick. You're around here regularly enough. How do I lay these out with one to go? Well, I think the number one pick is just so glaringly obvious. I think that's quite far up there. I think that's up there too. I think that's no bad. I think it's easy to put that there. I'm surprised by this tonight. That was actually a bit better than expected. That can go down there. You know that, great. And I have to say that as well. That's been much easier to do than I imagined. Let's do that. That, and that. I'm doing it on the hop. There's one more to tackle tonight, one more bottle. And for me, I need to be honest with you all, this is more intimidating to me than that bottle of Jura. This is Bowmore. Bowmore 12-year-old. 12-year-old Islay whiskey from a distillery that is nothing short of an absolute legend of a distillery. The legends that surround Bowmore and the whiskey that they've made over the years are nothing short of staggering. The type of thing that when people mention certain Bowmores and certain company with people who have been around whiskey long enough to have tried them, or if they are rich enough to be able to try them today, they just stop talking about specifics and they just kind of nod their head in sage recognition of what an epic distillery Bowmore is. But Bowmore today finds itself in a weird place. A very weird place. This is 12-year-old whiskey, and I think maybe the Jura probably pips it. But you can see this might be up there being one of our darkest whiskies. The Jura certainly pips it. It's quite dark. I would love to think that at 12 years old this could be natural. But we know it's not. Back when I was loving... Right about the time I would say that when the Glenfacrcla 10 first ever lit up my whiskey landing lights, I was in love with Bowmore 12. It was so fresh, so fruity, back when I didn't realize how to define or tease out individual fruits, I just knew that it was fruity. Bowmore, and specifically Bowmore 12, was fabulous. And when I wasn't in the mood for a full kind of peaty Lagavulin experience, Bowmore hit that spot perfectly. It was still giving me the kind of rich, savoury note that came from the peat, but it was so soft and so gentle. It was like a comforting peat. I loved it. I'm going back to 2010, 2012. Back when I was first in the peat cul-de-sac, the only thing I was sipping was peaty whiskey. To sip a Bowmore was a departure to something a bit less peated. And then recently, it's gotten very strange. What's crazy is it's still got that lovely, lovely, unique Bowmore nose. Some people say to look for lavender and a really, really kind of floral element to Bowmore, and I get it. It's here and it's intrinsic to the spirit. It's nothing to do with casks or location or provenance or ingredients or process. It's very much to do with the spirit that comes off the still. So, of course, it probably is process, and it's very unique. For me, lavender, no. It's green. More closer to rosemary, and certainly basil. Herbal, floral, yes. Lots of ripe, overripe fruit. Guava. Definitely a big dollop of gelatinous Turkish delight. Kind of wrapped in this weird smoke shell that's actually like a savoury thing. It makes you think of meats and things, but it's not because there's a meatiness to the spirit. It's because of the flavours in the whiskey that you would associate with barbecue meats and things like that. And all the while, this ripe fruit. A syrupy honey, runny honey, and something that gives you a sense of, in an environment where it's kind of well-worn leather and classic car cockpit, that type of thing. It's all there on the nose, but this is where the Bowmores of let's see how this one's doing. It tends to let you down when it goes over to the palate. Cheers. Donnerpass Whiskies bought me a wee dram to say I adore Bowmore's flavour profile, but the core range makes you weep. Bought 4 bottles of Vault Edition 1. The Spirit Peat profile sings in that bottle. Tim, I don't know if you picked up on that as a tip through the vPub here or if you discovered that your own, but I've been raving about that Bowmore. That is pure, proper Bowmore. Bowmore is often associated with sherry cask, but that Vaults Edition 1 is obviously much more kind of fresh bourbon, and it's just gorgeous. I don't know what to talk about in terms of cask on this. It's just kind of an oak thing. It's just, there's no kind of, I suppose most of the notes that I've shared with you are bourbon. I don't think I've brought out anything in my tasting notes tonight that would suggest sherry cask. The colour in the bottle would suggest sherry, but it's fakery. Damn, so close. Everything was there. I got excited. I was like, ooh, it's the finish that's doing it. The Bowmore DNA is there. It's here. I think I could, there's very few whiskies, malt whiskies, I feel like I could pick out blind. If you gave me time and peace and gave me a glass of Bowmore and said, see what you think of that, I think a lot of the time, I think I'd get more than a 50% hit rate that would be Bowmore. If it was a classic Bowmore and it's played like this, there's a obvious element to it. I think it's very unique. It's quite vocal. And when it arrives, it spoke to me in that way. I could taste it immediately. It was encouraging. And then and the development in the mid palate just switched up to this really sweet, sickly, cloying, maybe the modern palate thing that people were talking about. Maybe it's, oh. It has something similar to all the whiskies that we've had tonight. Despite the fact I'm sipping this neat, there's a sense that I've already added too much water. It's a 40% ABV, and that's coming from me who drinks whiskey the way I drink whiskey. Understand. To go past that, to try and just focus on what flavors are in the bottle, despite the low ABV. Promise, 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 bang, you're just dropped towards the end. I think it's heartbreaking that whiskey, Islay single malt whiskey, after 12 years, is treated like this. I would pay £60 for 12-year-old Bowmore that was clean, pure, unfettered, 46%, 48%, please, even better, unchill filtered, natural colour, integrity. You don't even need to give me it at 12 years old. Give me it at 8, 10 something years old. Just give us it honest. How much is this? Bowmore, £36. It's heartbreaking. It's a travesty. It's too cheap. And because they're trying to make that mid-30s, and let's be honest, you can go into your supermarket and pick this up at £30 on offer, maybe sometimes less. So you can guarantee the deals in those, they've been negotiated. The bulk sale has been made on that low selling price point. So what we've got in our hands is probably a 30 quid whiskey. It's Bowmore. It's 12-year-old Islay single malt whiskey from Bowmore. This is the story with so many of the whiskies here tonight. Old Pulteney 12, Jura, literally everyone I've been through. That's a shame. That's let me down. Here's the kicker. Here's the exclamation mark. I left a different exclamation mark at the start of the month when I talked about buying 3 bottles of 30 quid whiskey as opposed to one single £90 bottle of whiskey. I would rather do the latter. I would rather drink less and drink better, but each to their own. That was the point I made last time around. The point I'm making this time around is I'd be as well standing outside and just shouting into the wind. I'd be as well just screaming to nobody. It doesn't matter. And here's why. The £60 Bowmore that I imagine in my dreams, that's completely natural, 12 years old, 46, 48% ABV, unchill filtered, no caramel colouring added, I guarantee you, put together with a canny hand would be sublime, and I'd pay money for it. I really, really would. And there's no market for it. There is no market for that whiskey right now. It's a disaster. Why? Because we all spent, as whiskey botherers, the entire years of COVID over accumulating whiskey, to the point that we collectively drove the prices up and filled our houses, our storage, our lockups, our cabinets. We bought extra cabinets to take more whiskey. We were at home, we had nothing else to do. We found a hobby that we could invest in, and we bought so much whiskey, the prices were driven up. Now, that whiskey, the whiskey that we love, is struggling. It's on its backside late 2023 and throughout 2024 so far, compared to the COVID years, and actually compared to the years leading up to COVID too. We've just over-accumulated. It's what's happened. But these whiskies that I'm sharing with you tonight, these low price point stuff, they're flying. The reason for all the expansion that we're seeing across the big producers, from the investment from Diageo, from Edrington, from Pernod Ricard, the investment from all the big players are not for us to bring us nice, mature, natural, integrity forward whiskies in the future. They are not. They are for the 19.8 million bottles of Glenlivet 12. They are from the non-age statement, 25 pounds bottles of single malt Scotch whisky, aged in oak casks. That's what it's for. Boom time for those whiskies, not just in the UK and Europe, but globally. If you're and to the opposite end of the spectrum, collectible, super high investable whiskies, it's just Macallan, the real Macallan stuff, and yada, 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 Bowmore from the 60s and the 70s. That is still buoyant. The budget stuff, hugely buoyant. The high-end collectible stuff, investment stuff, hugely buoyant. Everything in between, a bit flat right now. We've been buying a bit too much, and we've got more choice than there's ever been. The core ranges, we've never seen core ranges like we have today. We've never seen distillery official bottlings like we have today. The choice is eye-watering to see, to witness. This is a positive thing. All the new distilleries coming on and coming into that. The new distilleries are not stepping in to make cheap supermarket whiskies. The new distilleries are stepping in to make flavour-forward, high-integrity whiskies. But that market is a wee bit depressed right now. We are all going to need to find out ways to talk about how amazing a thing whiskey is, to bring other people into whiskey, to make them feel seen, welcome, that it's not a snobby place, that it's a great place to be, that it's a fantastic pursuit, and more than anything, it's a way to enjoy alcohol responsibly, steady and slow, small volumes for flavour rather than drinking for effect. And that's on all of our shoulders. But there is nobody in the world that you can ask for a recommendation that's worse placed to recommend you whiskey than a whiskey geek. Why? Because the whiskies that I'm sharing with you now, nobody is going to talk about. No, none of us are going to share these whiskies. These are the whiskies that we need to share. These are the whiskies that we need to be clued up on. These are the whiskies that we need to encourage people to come into the whiskey scene via these gateways. Low ABV, recognized brands, messaging that they can connect with and not feel excluded, but more than anything, make no mistake, affordability. When they come into whiskey and you're asking them to pay 30, 35 pounds for one bottle of alcohol, that's shocking to them. Oftentimes it's shocking. If they're spending 10 pounds, 12 pounds, 15 pounds on a bottle of wine, that's a huge treat. To double or triple that to buy a bottle of whiskey is really quite trembling for them. They need to understand what whiskey is as a proposition, that one bottle can last them multiple bottles of wine. That it's something that you pour tiny amounts and you savour half sip by half sip by half sip. If we were to go out there with our cast strength Lafroigs or cast strength Benromachs or Aberlour Abunas and we were to hit them with these, yeah, we could have some success. Honestly, a gentle guiding hand, a wee bit of water, a wee bit of contrast and flavours, we could do okay with 46 and 48% as well. But we're not always around all the time to do that. They need to be able to go out and explore on their own. And the way that they do that is with whiskies like these that I'm sharing with you now and the whiskies I shared with you at the start of June. Some of them are not up to scratch. That's absolutely true. But some of these are bloody good. And some of these are way more than adequate for doing what I'm talking about. Because right now, what we need to do is reach out to our friends, our acquaintances, people, the strangers that are not friends yet, through making whiskey clubs or meets or whatever it may be, and teaching people how to be healthy with their consumption of alcohol. And we need products in order for them to go and lay their own cookie trail of over accumulation. And make no mistake, they often start with these whiskies. Some of these are good. Where am I putting that Bowmore? Here. So there are some surprises. So what I'm going to do, and I appreciate, and I'll ask you to kindly speak amongst yourself for a moment, because I'm going to jump in, going to shuffle around what my ranking is, and I'll drop it in. I'm going to take a screenshot of your ranking, and I'll make an overlay for that as well. So there might be a wee bit of chatting amongst yourselves for a while. I've never tried to do this before. Please indulge me. But let me know what you think about all of that thinking. Lolander is saying, Tom Freeney, head along to the Belfry run by the same folk as then Ensign Yurt. Tasting on Sunday. Aquavitae is going to be there. I am going to be there this weekend. Lolander, will I meet you? Will I meet Tom Freeney? That would be amazing. I don't know what you look like, but you probably have got a good idea what I look and sound like. Glen Murray is a giant selection of 40% bottles, then the 18-year-old 47.2% non-chill filtered first full bourbon, full maturation for the US, or for us. He's saying for us. I think he's saying for us. Donald Pass Whiskey Tim. Fantastic. Love it. Absolutely love it. And Glen Murray, much like the other ones that I've been mentioning tonight, is another perfect example, especially the 12-year-old. Could have easily been in a lineup tonight, Tom Freeney is saying. But the reputation stands. If I buy a Bowmore from my dad, he'll smile and be very appreciative. But I know he'd be disappointed with the dram itself. Wow. And Bud is saying, Bud Jenkins, so good to see you, buddy. He's saying, you've described the problem for all many markets. People go to a chain supermarket or a Walmart to buy meat and produce instead of buying locally grown quality natural meat and produce. Bud, you're absolutely spot on. It's not a unique dynamic to whiskey. Eric Cunliffe in Canada, good to see you, buddy. Aquavitae, we all have to start somewhere, and I'm grateful for the journey. That's right, and we all need to be mindful of the fact that some people are going to need some guidance. And that means that we need to be a little bit more kind of open and pragmatic and not kind of snobby and just help them get through themselves. Despite all my chat tonight, I got to go. I got into whiskey via Jura 10, Highland Park 12, Glenmorangie 10. I never would have thought I'd pay £60 for a bottle. Never mind what I'm spending now. The worst person to ask is a geek, Ben. It's exactly my point. We need to try, and it's hard for me. It's not just me sitting sipping these. I had to buy these tonight. Thank you to you. You gave me the ability to do this. So if I talk about, oh, I'm taking one for the team, nonsense. I'm doing this because you enable me to do this. You empower me to do this. There are some really, really quite nice wee whiskies here tonight. There are some that are genuinely shunned by us as a collective community for reasons. And it's not the whiskey that's made in the distillery typically. It's the way that the whiskey is taken and put into bottle, how it's presented beyond that. And when we want to understand why it's handled like that and why it's treated like that, we need do nothing more than look at the market, look at the success stories that are out there. Remember when Glenlivet 12 dropped its age statement and went to a Founder's Reserve? We were all up in arms. We were shocked. That Founder's Reserve is one of the most successful Pernod Ricard single malt products in existence. Based on price, based on putting single malt whiskey with a recognised branded name on it into hands of people that just want to be reassured that they're drinking a good quality recognised single malt. Founder's Reserve has got better over the years. I'm sorry to say that the Glenlivet 12 is not one of my picks, but Founder's Reserve is kind of in the balance too. But it's like Jura. It is utterly potently successful. It's a completely different planet from where we are. Okay. I am going to, now I've picked this order. I just need to work out how it might disrupt that order over there. So I'm going to make an absolute mess of this and try and do it live while I speak to you. I'm going to try and pick mine. Okay. What am I getting rid of? I have to get rid of that. Definitely get rid of that. Definitely get rid of that. That might stay. That might stay. That might stay. That is going to stay. That's gone. That is definitely staying. That might struggle. That is gone. And they're gone. That has to go as well. I'm sorry. It's just not good enough. So that leaves me to get rid of one more, the weakest one there. Okay. Done. Going to move these into order now. It's easy to pick what one comes first. It's so easy. This is not interesting viewing. It really isn't. But that gets number one. That means that gets number two. Superb. Now, where do I put you and you and you? Okay. This is actually a lot easier than I imagined. The caveat is, of course, I've only had 1 or 2 drams of these with you and a couple in between. Wow, that goes up. And that beats that. I'm done. I'm done. I've locked in what mine are. And now all I'm going to do is upload this as an overlay so I can share it with you. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing. And we'll call this Roy's Edit. Then I'll upload this. Hopefully it's quick and I can share with you. Now I might sit down and I might move these around 1 or positions or 2, but I feel pretty confident in this lineup, and you, I think, are going to be surprised by some of the positions here. But I've done it in front of you tonight. The list that I shared with you at the beginning of tonight has absolutely been disrupted, and here it is. This is me doing this before I've seen yours. I'm going to do yours now. Number 1, Benromach. Clear, absolutely clear. So if I'm given the Pulteney and the Benromach, my 2 favourites from the two lists, it's easy which one to pick. From there on in, I still am in love with that Glenmorangie tropical vibe, despite the fact it's at 40%. Every time I sip Glenmorangie, I get the pineapple cubes and I'm happy. Singleton has been a real shock to me, a pleasant shock, a surprise even. You saw the level in that bottle. None of the drams I've poured from this, no one's come back and said, no. They've been, if you talk about not finding fault in a whiskey, this is a perfect example of that. This is good malt. Dufton, Singleton of Dufton 12-year-old. Does it go ahead of that kind of really rich, kind of flavorful Glenfacrcla that I discovered tonight? Right now, perhaps because it's summertime. I don't know, but right now, when you're making a decision, I didn't know which way to put those around tonight, and it ended up like that. The Glen Scotia nudges out that Loch Lomond. The Loch Lomond only lets me down on the finish a little bit. Glenfiddich, my staple Glenfiddich, makes it into the top 10, still holding out there. It's not just an emotional contact for that Glengoyne. Absolutely not. That performed tonight remarkably better than I thought it did. and the AnCnoc sneaks in my 10th place just because of how utterly unique it is. Now, that's me committed, okay? So what I'm going to do now that we've locked down that, oh good, this is going to be difficult to, between 1 and 2, there are 2 votes separating them. 344 of you have responded. So I'm taking a screen grab. So what I'll do now is find a way to get that screen grab up to you. Bear with me. This will be worth the effort because it'll mean that you can clearly see this. Move it in. Well, I think it'd be nice for you to see the visual as well. I'll do both because I want you to see that this is legitimate data that I'm using and not just me kind of making stuff up. That'll do. We can see that. Move it all the way up. The reason I'm having to do this instead of prepping it in advance is, of course, because I had to let it run live. Right, now we switch that off and I sort out the order here. So the winner is, oh my goodness, are you kidding? That is incredible. Wow. Okay. Whatever you say. Whatever you say. Wow. Second place for you guys. This is amazing to see. I'm going to share this with you. And if I just offset it as I move these around, you should be able to see it. What's number 3 for you guys? Okay. Number 4. Wow. Sorry to keep you holding. So close. Come on. Position 7th locked in. 8 is there. 9. And 10. I think I've got that right. I think I've got this right. Okay, so I'm going to export this and let you see what you voted for. Community. Edit. There is some overlap, but let's just let you see this. Okay, I can drop into the chat now while these upload and let you. Wow. I can take away mine now. Oops. So here's the first shot I'm going to give you. Lowlander is saying, can you not put some music on while we all wait? I'm done now. I'm ready to share it with you. We can go back and see Lowlander. Tom Freeney's talking to Lowlander. Don't have a ticket, but I feel I should visit the Belfry and say hello this Sunday anyway. You'd be very welcome. It would be nice to shake your hand, Tom. That would be cool. Jimmy Legacy saying, what happened to my Macallan? I just picked 10. I didn't rank them. Should I have? No, you only needed to pick 10. Don't worry about it. By everyone picking 10, you know, it automatically gives us consensus with 344 responses. It's a big enough sample. I only put it up this afternoon. That's much better response than I expected. Thank you for your trust. Lowlander is saying, can you not put, I did pick that one. The music hasn't been playing. I should have put some music on. David is saying, the suspense is killing me. Rick Johnson saying, 15 minutes till the 3-hour mark, Roy. No problem. This should be called vPub and G Sheets. Here we go. Here is the results of, hopefully you can still hear me as I put this big massive overlay across, but these are the results so that you know that it's legitimate. 344 responses. As I say, look at the difference between first place and second place there. Talisker 10 beats Benromach 10 by 2 marks. Talisker 10 didn't even get in my top 10. Benromach was my first pick, very close to yours. You put it second. Glen Scotia 10, I put Glen Scotia 10 mid-table. AnCnoc 12, wow, AnCnoc 12 gets a 4th place position from you guys. It's amazing. AnCnoc just made it into my top 10 and no more. 234 comes up at mid-table, 5th place for Old Pulteney. Old Pulteney doesn't even make it in for me. It's just not good enough. Lefroy is not good enough. You guys voted for that. Mid-table for you is Loch Lomond 10. You're enjoying that. Fantastic. It's mid-table for me. And then as we go further down where we are at, Glenmorangie 10 is next. I agree with you on that. I put my Glenmorangie up much higher, of course. Then behind we've got Balvenie just making it in, and in last place I think we've got Glengoyne 10 in last place for you guys. Is that right? I don't know. I'll have a wee look at the overlay. It's much better to look at the visual. So there we go. That's the actual 344 responses. That's the actual kind of results of the Google's form sheet. And here is the visual. My ranking with yours on top. Yours is Talisker 10, Benromach, Glen Scotia, AnCnoc, Old Pulteney, Lefroy, Loch Lomond, Glenmorangie, Balvenie, and Glengoyne. I'm going to suggest to you, I'm going to put it to you as I peek over all of these bottles. I'm going to suggest to you that a lot of your ranking is based on your memory and your perception of brand. Lefroy has made it mid-table for you because of your memories of the Lefroys I've got here, but it is not in this bottle of Lefroy. It is not. Old Pulteney, same. I'm going to suggest to you that you've put Talisker right up front because it's Talisker, because it's 45.8% ABV, but the road ahead for you in Talisker, I'm telling you, you might still love it. Where is it? You might still love what's in this whiskey. You might still love the kind of more first fill type flavor they've gone, the more modern style, the kind of less mineral, coastal, salty, pepper catch type Talisker, the less vibrance, and it's gone for this much sweeter, kind of more modern, kind of sickly coating. It's not for me though. It doesn't even make it in my top 10. Glengoynes are close. You've put AnCnoc 12 way up further than I would have started with that. I would have imagined the AnCnoc 12 was going to do much better. It's certainly unique. You put Glen Scotia up there. I think your picks are maybe, and I feel I deserve to be attacked for saying this, but I'm going to say it. I feel your picks are based on memories, a wee bit of nostalgia, and a wee bit of what you think the things are, as opposed to what they actually are. Anyway, I've been banging on for a long time now, but we've got through 10 and more whiskies. We've talked about 20 whiskies tonight. It's a lot, and we won't do it for a long time. When we do this again, we'll bring on the Edredar 10s, the Auchentoshan 12s, the Highland Park 12s, or the 10s, or whatever Highland Park's core range age-stated entry point whiskey is at that time. At some point in the future, we'll pick up and scoop up all the ones that we missed, the Glen Murrays, etc., and so many more. But I think we've done it now. We've covered it. We've found the stuff that I think is worth you chasing, and you have spoken about the stuff that you think is worth chasing. I think that some whiskies are on the way down and some whiskies are on the way up. Most are looking after us. Donna Pasca is saying, I love that Balvenie, but the price is so high where I am. There are lots of 12-year-old non-chill filtered, non-coloured bottles for the same. Sorry, no thanks. Makes perfect sense to me too. I'm pricing the Balvenie on me being able to pick it up for 45 quid, which still puts it up at one of the most expensive, but I know that I could pour that Balvenie for anyone that comes through the door and they would be happy. Totally agree with the Barfly ranking. Maybe I go with the Benromach in first, but Talisker would make it in the top 10, says Fernando. I hope that it remains that way for you, Fernando. Pete Hiddis, thanks for rewarding our great memories. And Tom Franey is saying, but doesn't memory and circumstance always affect preference? Absolutely, no question. But as long as we don't lock ourselves into that nostalgia, we need to stay open and promiscuous about whiskies going forward and the fact that they will change. We don't want to throw money at things as the quality drops. We don't want to stay brand loyal because we are all leaving ourselves open for abuse. Nostalgia has no effect on Frank or myself, says Jimmy Legg. That's right, the elders of the channel. I picked Benromach, Balvenie, Glenmoe 10 as a top 3. The rest was blah aquavitae. Oh, that's interesting, Ben. How many of them have you had? Fastcraft is saying, of course, no attack. You're right. But what do you expect? Very few of us will have tasted these recently. Klaus, you hit the nail right on the head. We are surrounded by much, much better quality whiskies. I refer to my previous points that I made. David is saying, for many of these, I have not had in years. Perfect, David. Rick Johnson is saying, I chose 7 out of 10. Will this translate to the quiz? Might do, Rick. Perfect segue into the quiz. Gino Camo is saying, I had 7 out of 10 with your picks and 9 out of 10 with the Barflies. Fantastic consensus. Super stuff. That suggests that the consensus of me and the Barflies is much better. Listen, thank you all for taking the time to go on and vote. Thank you for indulging me. This is a very long session tonight. It's inevitable that it would be. But of course, we never, ever have a vPub without finishing with a quiz at the end. Please hang around for a wee bit. There remains well over 200 of you in at this point in time. It's fantastic to have your company. I know it's going to drop when we get to the quiz at the end. Maybe you're welcoming you in now for the quiz at the end because you're picking it up in the replay, and that's just as cool. Fantastic. The quiz tonight will be tricky, but it'll start off very comfortable and very easy, a wee bit like your whiskey journeys, and then get much more challenging towards the end, exactly as it should. Good luck, everyone. Thank you for this evening, and good luck with the quiz at the end. 2 more vPubs before the summer break. Next week is the best of the year so far, and the week after that is a gamified party. And obviously, I'm trying to line up some fun guests so that I can relax and have a wee bit of a party before the summer break. For patrons, there is a lock-in on the 7th of July, and I'll have news about the Loch Lomond bottlings on that date too, the Aquavitae Barfly bottlings that's going out. Patrons, of course, will get the priority there, and it will go through the tiers as it always does, but the bottles are imminent. I'm really excited about it. Rob Smith is surprised. There's a quiz. Of course, you know better. Yeah, I'm leaving, says Jimmy Legg. We can even read. He doesn't even need to italicize his language to know that he's being sarcastic. And Graham Fraser is here. Many of these are community found behind ordinary bars, so we can try them periodically to see if they've changed. Perfect pragmatism, Graham. Superb. Good to have you in, buddy. All right, here we go. Jimmy Legg has put the Roddy emojis in. Roddy and I are on track. We had another wee chat a couple of days ago. Rick Johnson is saying, speaking of nostalgia, I'm celebrating my first 10 out of 10 in the quiz last week. Hey, let's raise a wee glass to that, and thank you for your dram, Rick, your generous dram, and congratulations for your success in the quiz, buddy. Cheers, Rick Johnson. As I attempt a wee bit of multitasking and bring the quiz in. Good luck. Question 1. Which of these whiskey personalities has celebrated 50 years working in the industry? Which of these personalities have been in the whiskey industry for 50 years already? A. Billy Walker of Glenallachie, Jim McEwen of Brookladdie, or C. Robert Fleming of Angus Dundee? Whiskey with Molly celebrating being a member for 33 months and asking, where's Wook? I didn't ken. He wasn't here last week either, Ben. I think that it's incumbent upon all of us to forgive people. It's part of the rules of the vPub. You're allowed to come and go as you please. But it's nice that he's missed. You've been missed tonight, Wook. We're looking out for you. Perhaps you'll make a reappearance in the future. Maybe you're enjoying some nice sunny summer holidays somewhere. Which of these guys, Billy Walker, Jim McEwen, or Robert Fleming, have enjoyed 50 years in the whiskey industry? They all feel right, says James Morgan. ABC. If you're going to pick a question for it to be all potential answers, absolutely. Question 1 should be where it is. Nobody goes home from the quiz at the end tonight without a point. Everybody gets a point. Billy Walker celebrated, and I think back in 2022, a couple of years ago. Jim McEwen, almost a decade or more ago, 2013, 2014, I think. And Robert Fleming, very, very recently, just this year, he's 50 years in the industry. Congratulations all. Question 2, which of these has a Glasgow edition? I'm going to give you 3 whiskey ranges, or 3 lines, if you like. And I'm asking you which has a Glasgow edition. A, Clydeside has a Glasgow edition. B, Douglas Laing's Remarkable Regional Malts has a Glasgow edition. Or C, Compass Box has a Glasgow edition. Dorpass Whiskey is saying, bless you, Wook. Hope you're on vacation somewhere wonderful. It's kind of cool. I think that Ben Whiskey with Molly, Tony Nelson, Tim Dorpass Whiskey, Helen and Andy, Jimmy Legg, certainly, Kyle Taylor, so many of you, I think, Gino Camo, and like tonight, Gino is here, but I'm not sure Graham Young's here. I've not seen his name. So it's almost like, you know, you're missed. It might not always be that I'm able to give you a call out on the evening, but I notice when you're not around, definitely. Which of these has a Glasgow edition? One Glassman Warner is saying B. Too Slow Rob is saying B and C. Graham's not here, says Gino. And Graham Fraser is saying at C, not an artistic version. A nice one, absolutely. Clydeside is a Glasgow distillery, but it doesn't have a Glasgow edition yet. Douglas Lane, Remarkable Regional Malts, does have a Glasgow edition. And Compass Box, of course, has a blend called the Glasgow Blend. There we go. I've got a wee picture here of the Epicurean Glasgow edition. Now, there was one where the traffic cone was on the Epicurean's head, I think, back in the day, 2019, I think, 2018 I'm going back to, I'm not sure. But this is a cast strength Lowland blended malt whiskey, currently on their site, I noticed this week, for £36. There's no affiliate link or anything here. I'm just bringing it to your attention because 58.6% ABV for £36. These offers are good right now. Question 3, which of the following distilleries features a prominent Doig's ventilator, or otherwise known as pagoda or cupola, or whatever you would want to call it, a Doig's ventilator roof? Looking for a prominent feature of a typical distillery pagoda at either A, Bunnahabhain, B, Glenfarclas, or C, Glengyle. Which of these 3 has a prominent Doig's ventilator on display? Wow, that's the first time I've reached for water tonight. So there's something to be said for drinking lower ABV whiskies, right? Rob Smith is saying 2 out of 2, but I know I don't have a Glasgow edition. Justin Wan is here dropping in to say hi to everyone, heading off to work, and we'll catch everything on replay. Wow. So Justin is often in very, very late of an evening, right? Joining us, and tonight he's dropping in before he heads off to work. Thank you, Justin, buddy. I hope you enjoy it when you pick it up on the replay, and I hope the work day is good to you. Happy Friday. Cheers. Send him off to work with a wee skip in his step. I can tell you that Sugar Kitty Tom Frenny, Whiskey Total. That looks like a new name, Whiskey Total. Nice to have you in. Derek K. I don't think I've welcomed you before. Maybe I have, Derek. Falsgraph. Where's the Value Roy? Everybody spot on. B. Glenfacrcla. It's always a bit awkward, this thing, when you see it, but there you go. It was repurposed and it's stuck over the entrance to the visitor centre today. That was last atop their kiln back in the early 70s. It's not been used in over 50 years, but it's looking polished and nice in the visitor centre. Okay, question 4. Which of these Highland distilleries has a Palo Cortado cask release as part of its core range? A. Deanston has a Palo Cortado finish. B. Royal Bracla has a Palo Cortado finish. Or C. Glenglassaugh has a Palo Cortado finish. Let's hear you. It's amazing to see then you see the answers coming in, you start to panic, don't you? I mean, there's no sense in panicking for me because no. No. Maybe there should be a banana skin here, but no, I don't think so. Which of these Highland distilleries has a Palo Cortado release as part of its core range? Deanston has had quite a few. They had a 12-year-old Palo Cortado. I used to rave about it years ago. Loved the stuff. They had a vintage, quite expensive Palo Cortado, 1997, released more recently. Palo Cortado does appear at Deanston, but it's never been part of their core range. Glenglassaugh, never been part of their core range. Royal Bracla's 18-year-old is always from Palo Cortado. Royal Bracla's standard 18-year-old core range is a Palo Cortado expression. I suspect that has picked up a banana skin for quite a few of you. I think some of you have maybe tripped up on that one quite early on. Royal Bracla, 18-year-old is the answer there. 46% all natural as well, but a bit pricey, especially at launch. It was ridiculously expensive, but everything else is starting to catch up with it now. It's about 130 quid these days. Question 5 is always the picture. Be a bit of photoshopping going on here to take away the branding for the most part. What distillery are we looking at? I'm going to ask you where we are. Are we A, in the Highlands, B, in Speyside, or C, in the Lowlands? A bit of ass-hattery coming in here, because not only do you need to know what distillery you're looking at, but you need to remember which region that distillery is in. On the other hand, you can look at it and say, oh, that's got a kind of a Highlands vibe, or a kind of a Speyside vibe, or a Lowlands vibe. And it helps you guess a wee bit. €118 for me, says Falsgraph, for his Palo Cortado Royal Bracla. It's a much better price, typical of Germany to get or continental Europe, often the times, to get the prices. Jimmy Legacy, Aquavita, it's no fair. I've only been to Campbelltown. That's because you've only been here for whiskey purposes once, Jimmy Leg. You need to make more of an effort in the future, my friend. Spot on, everyone. Falsgraph is going with the crowd and saying A. Nicola is saying Edredar, question mark. There's a lot of whitewashing going on here, but this is not Edredar. But if you were to answer the region that Edredar in, Nicola, you would be spot on. It's the Highlands. We're looking at Glenturret here. The external shell and tube condensers here on the left-hand side of that big white building there. And just beyond it, you can see the kind of brass, sorry, no, it's not brass, it's copper canopy of the new reception area for the visitor centre, the new bar area. It's a nice wee visit, a really nice visit. Question 6. Which of the below distilleries have released several expressions featuring the term quadruple? Who releases expressions with the word quadruple on the labelling? A. Jura, B. Loch Lomond, or C. Bruichladdich? I could have phrased that question, which island distillery, by the look of the options there. Released several expressions featuring the term quadruple. Jura, Loch Lomond, or Bruichladdich? Nicholas saying been there as well. It just looked like Pitlochry. Yeah, Edinburgh's just up behind Pitlochry. Glenturret is down closer to Creeth. Maybe a bit more central. And one featuring the term yellow, says Jimmy Legg. You've all got this one absolutely correct. I can't fool you with this. When we talk about quadruple, we're talking about, of course, Bruichladdich. They had their new make, which was called X4, wasn't it? Or times 4? X4. They've had an X4 whiskey as well, but obviously they've even had a quadruple distilled Octomore. Bruichladdich is the answer. Seem to be in good shape so far. Going into question 7. On which of these contemporary bottles may you find a valid royal warrant? So I'm looking for a bottle that you'd go out and buy today that would have a valid royal warrant on the label. A, that would be Ballantine's Finest. B, that would be Johnnie Walker Blue Label. Or C, that would be Chivas Regal Royal Salute. Could have made that a banana skin with Tom and Towels. Aquavite says Ben Whiskey with Molly. I wonder, I think what's happened with the quizzes recently, Ben, is that they've started off easy, and then it gets to the kind of the end, question 7, question 8, question 9, and it starts to get really, really obscure and hard. And the last couple of weeks I've had 2 asshats at the end, and that's the same tonight. So 9 and 10 both have more than a whiff of asshattery around them. So try and hold on till the end to see how we get on. Which of those has a royal warrant? Splitting the crowd a wee bit, but most of you are going with, some of you think it's Chivas Regal Royal Salute, some of you are going with Johnnie Walker Blue. I can tell you that Ballantine's Finest, Johnnie Walker Blue, Chivas Regal Royal Salute, all once upon a time had a royal warrant. The only one that has a valid royal warrant today in 2024 is Johnnie Walker. So Johnnie Walker Blue Label would have it. I've got some pictures here to show you. Royal Salute on the left-hand side there has a kind of crown and lion, which replaced their original royal warrant. Ballantine's has some kind of heraldic crest thing, replacing their Victorian royal warrant, and Blue Label maintains their royal warrant today, part of the Johnnie Walker stable, of course. Question 8. Which of these whiskies could likely have had their barley malted in an on-site Saladin box? For those of you who don't know what a Saladin box is, it was a way to kind of automate the malting process. So these big concrete boxes could steep the barley, could turn the barley, could rake the barley, could dry the barley, well, it couldn't dry it, it wasn't like a kiln, but it was a way to malt the barley in an automated way. So these concrete boxes had these moving, rotating rakes and things to turn it. But which of these whiskies could likely have had their barley malted in an on-site Saladin box? Doesn't happen anywhere anymore. But Benromach's 15-year-old Flora and Fauna could potentially have had their barley malted in a Saladin box. Tamdhu 18-year-old could have had the barley malted in a Saladin box, or Glenvor, the 1990 Secret Speyside release, could have been theoretically malted in a Saladin box. This is a Menno question, Aquavite. Very nice. I'll take that as a compliment, Jimmy Legg. Oh. I'm going to pause for a moment to make sure everybody wants to be quite happy. James Morgan is saying, I'm with Ben and Graham A. Well, Ben has switched to B. The banana makes me doubt this one, says Fernando. It's a tricky question. The banana's in there because it's tricky. It's a difficult one. Benrinnes 15-year-old flora and fauna. Benrinnes was famous for its salad in boxes, but the Benrinnes salad in boxes were ditched way back in the 1980s. 15-year-old flora and fauna has a chance of still being partially triple distilled these days, but not likely. It's definitely not going to be Saladin. Glenvor 1990 Secret Speyside. It doesn't exist. It can't exist. Glenvor closed in 1983, but Glenvor was the first distillery to ever introduce Saladin boxes. So the answer was Tamdhu's 18-year-old. Tamdhu was the last operating distillery to employ Saladin boxes as their malting. I'm not sure that they got 100% out of their own in-house Saladins, which is why I phrased it could likely. But Tamdhu 18-year-old was the answer. I think it was in operation up till 2009, 2010 at Tamdhu. Question 9, Ass Hattery is a foot. What happened in the same year that Lalique Group purchased Glenturret from Edrington? You'll remember that we were all panicking what was going to happen to Glenturret. It is a bit pricey these days, but I think honestly the turnaround, the extra visibility that Glenturret has today is only a good thing. I wish the prices were just a wee bit better, but it is what it is. What year did that purchase happen, and what happened at the same time? A, it happened at the same time that Lag became the second distillery producing on the Isle of Arran. Or B, it happened at the same time that Glasgow launched their first release, their inaugural 1770 Glasgow distillery. Or was it C, it happened in the same year that Rosebank and Port Ellen announced the rebirth, the reopening of Rosebank and Port Ellen was announced. Actually, the same time that Rosebank, Port Ellen and Brora, the same year that they were all announced. Which was it? Dorpas Whiskey Tim is saying, I've had a couple of Tamdhu 20-year-old bottles and first full bourbon hogshead bottled years ago. Unique spirit character, Aquavitae. Well, very likely been from Saladin maltings too. Okay, everyone seems to be going for C or A on this one. Rob Smith is saying A. Bruce Bernard is saying A. Glenn B is saying A. Paul Gibbs is saying A. Fantastic. 2019 was the year that Glenturret was purchased from Edrington by Lalique Group and another private investor, I forget the name. Rosebank and Port Ellen and Brora rebirth announced 2017. Glasgow launched their first release inaugural in 2018, which means its Lag was founded on Arran in 2019. It's only 5 years old, Lag. Thanks, Aquavitae, for another great Thursday night vPub. I'll try and hook up on Sunday with you guys and Desi Vleeland. So, Daisy, are you heading into Scotland on Sunday? What's bringing you to Scotland on Sunday? And finally, question 10. Of course, it's an ass hat to finish on as well. The penultimate and the ultimate questions tonight is an ass hat. I can't see. Oh, Sugar Kitty's on a 9 out of 9. Held it together till the end. My goodness. How many other 9s do we have? Sugar Kitty, are you out alone tonight? Bruce is celebrating, saying yay. I don't know if that means if he's a 9 out of 9. Graham Fraser slipped up on an 8. Okay. Could be we're all holding our fingers crossed for Sugar Kitty for the asshat at the end. 2 weeks in a row. Rick Johnson's counting. Fantastic. Here's your asshat question, Sugar Kitty. How many Scotch malt distilleries begin with the letter L? I've shared at least one with you tonight, right? About the same as the number of A, distilleries in production on Islay. Very common answer. B, about the same as the number of years that Inchderny has been in operation. Or C, about the same as the number of years of age in the oldest existing Ardnamurchan malt. Distilleries in production on Islay. Years Inchderny has been on the go. Or C, well, I guess it's the same years Ardnamurchan's been on the go, but years of age in the oldest existing Ardnamurchan malt. Mike is saying, suddenly I feel very sleepy and it's only 7 p.m. Mike, I hope that means it's a comfortable early bed for you. It's wonderful to have had you in tonight as well. Tom Franey is saying C because Ardna, good man. Let's see what Sugar Kitty is bringing. Complete guess due to the time in the Netherlands. Frank, that's perfectly acceptable. Once Sugar Kitty's posted in the response, Sugar Kitty goes for C, the number of years in the oldest existing Ardnamurchan malt. I can tell you that. Well, in fact, I think shall I read them out and you can count them. L distilleries are Longmorn, Lone Wolf, Loch Lomond, Loch Lee, Linkwood, Lindores, Laphroaig, Lag, Lagavulin. 9 distilleries. 9. Distilleries in production on Islay is 10. Inchderny has been in operation since 2015, which is 9. C, years of age of the oldest existing Ardnamurchan malt, is also 9. So Sugar Kitty celebrates his 10 out of 10 tonight. Despite the fact I put 2 asshats at the end, I wanted to make it a wee bit more likely that somebody got that one right. So let's jump in and see who managed to get their 10. Of course, Sugar Kitty managed it. Fantastic. Congratulations on your 10 out of 10. Kyle Taylor, boom, 10 out of 10. I'm dancing. So Kyle Taylor's there as well. We've got 2. Wonderful, Kyle. Pete Ed is saying 8 out of 10 and happy with that. Simone in New Zealand. Chris Barlow both on 8. Fantastic. Derek K on 8. Nicholas on 9. Falscraft also on 9. Celebrating. Fantastic, guys. Well done. Good stuff. Sugar Kitty celebrating with his emoji. Fantastic. Rick Johnson celebrating. Kyle Taylor on 10 out of 10 as well. Great stuff. Bruce Bernard on a 9. Jimmy Legg only managed a 5 this week. Still a pass mark. Jimmy, celebrate it. Glenn B, good to see you, Glenn, on a 9 out of 10. Smart crowd, fair enough. You follow the crowd when you have to, buddy. Dorpass Whiskey is celebrating on a 9 out of 10. Fantastic. Great stuff. Listen, I've kept you all for long enough. This has been the longest vPub in a long time, but we did go through a lot of whiskies. I don't know how long it's going to be before we do something similar like this again in the future, but I've used 2 vPubs to make 2 points, and I hope it's been worthwhile for everybody. Anyways, I've reminded everyone I'm going right back to my AnCnoc 12 right at the very beginning of tonight, right? Well, as I've suggested already a couple of times, I hope you'll join me for next week's best of the year so far in 2024. Where we can recap some of the best whiskies that have happened across this year, and obviously invite you guys to bring along yours too. And the week after that is the gamified session with, well, hopefully by next week I'll be able to tell you the guest that's joining me for that, one that I'm looking forward to. And until then, I'll raise this glass. Thank you all for your dedication, for your time, for your endurance this evening. Remind you that you're very dearly loved, and I look forward to hanging out with you again next Thursday night. Slant your barflies.